Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance Astrology. Welcome to my channel. We are going to record today the yearly overview of 2026. Super exciting. I'm joined by lovely Caitriona and by Duna this time around, and we're going to talk about the upcoming transits that are important. So, we're going to talk about Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries, Saturn Neptune conjunction. We're also going to talk about the fire horse year, which is coinciding with a lot of fire energy here as well. The nodes moving, the eclipses, Uranus moving into Gemini, Chiron moving into Taurus. I'm just giving everyone a small overview. Jupiter moving into Leo. As you can see, a lot of ingresses. Later on that year, we have a Venus retrograde, and we're also starting a Mars pre-shadow period end of year. So this is kind of just a bit of an overview what you're in for today. We are recording this on Sunday, December 21st at around 3 p.m. Central European time. And I'm going to let both of these lovely people introduce themselves. So we can start with Caitriona. Hi.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. I'm Caitriona and I'm a karmic astrologer, a writer, and a teacher based in Ireland. And you can find me mainly on Instagram at Caitriona Astro, and I'm also on TikTok and occasionally on YouTube.
Great, lovely. And Duna, hi.
Hi, I'm Duna. I'm sorry if you follow Amiya, you have seen me in a couple of videos. We're doing the Deccan dance together, and we did a couple of the episodes on the houses, the fifth house and the eighth house. I'm an astrologer, a musician, a ecologist, a writer, and also a sound engineer, and I'm from Madrid, Spain. And generally, I'm someone who is very open to like collaborations and like I love hearing from other astrology enthusiastic people, and I love learning astrology. I consider myself a forever learner. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about 2026, which is a pretty huge year astrologically wise.
Yes. And you can find Duna at Duna Holler,
Do
but
not holler.
exactly. I'm gonna
Yes.
I'm gonna link all the links down below so you can easily find everyone. And we are gonna start. So we're not gonna talk month by month. We are kind of gonna go over the most important transits, but they are gonna be in the time frame as the year progresses. So we're not gonna talk month by month, but it's gonna kind of go in that direction. And the first thing that awaits us this year is Neptune and Saturn moving back into Aries for good, because we already had a bit of a glimpse this year of both Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries, but right now they're back in Pisces. They retrograded back. And so we're getting the final push of that. And next year, when they go retrograde, they're not going back into the previous signs. So Neptune moves into Aries January 26th, and Saturn moves into Aries on February 14th. So it's going to be an interesting Valentine's Day that we have approaching. And yeah, so who wants to take the lead and talk a bit about both of that or one transit first?
Well, the Saturn and Neptune returning to Aries, I think it's lovely to look at it in the context of the Piscean energy sort of wrapping up, apart from the karmic nodes, that, all of those Piscean themes that have been lingering and lingering for almost 14 years now, that there is going to be massive feeling of possibly like closure, ending of an era for a lot of people, both globally and personally. And when Saturn and Neptune, ingress into Aries, they're going to be ruled by Mars, which will be in Aquarius. And I think this is important to bear in mind because that Mars in Aquarius is going to activate a lot of the Pluto in Aquarius themes, that have already been activated, globally and also in everybody's natal chart. So the Saturn and Neptune story is so connected to Mars and Pluto as well. And Mars and Pluto, when we think of them as archetypes, they're not very gentle archetypes to work with. Mars wants action and Pluto wants transformation. So we know that this Saturn Neptune, let's say return, before we even talk about the conjunction, this return energy into Aries will be this sudden, not maybe not sudden isn't the right word, but this kind of point of I need to take action, I need to make a change, I need to do something. Because Mars is always seeking, this kind of, right, like jump over this hurdle, climb over this wall. He wants you to do something. So action will be required. But because it's Neptune and because it's Saturn, it's going to be action that also requires a bit of restraint. So it's almost like people might be a little bit kind of frustrated because there's something they want to act upon or change, but the two planets involved will ask you to, maybe like sow the seed, but not actually, reap the harvest just yet. Plant the seed. That's how I see, those ingresses formulating. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I
Yeah, that
think
was
the
a oh
just I want to say just one small thing, and then you can speak, Duna. I think it's interesting that both of them are moving into Aries before the astrological new year starts, before we get that spring equinox. I feel like that's also probably that frustrating part because we're still like in the midst of winter where it's not really time to take action yet, but things feel intense. Certainly, I feel like February, one of the more intense months. Also, with the eclipses rolling around, we're going to talk a bit about that later. And yes, just wanted to mention that. Now, I'll let Duna speak.
yes. I think it's very interesting that you mention the rulership by Mars being in Aquarius, because by the time Neptune goes into Aries, the rulership of Mars is not even a be in Capricorn yet. Is with the ingress of Saturn, which is with Mars in Aquarius. And that move of Mars from Capricorn to Aquarius is not only Mars, it's almost every personal planet. We're gonna have this whole kind of parade of planets where there's gonna be a double Cassimi with Venus, Mars, and the Sun. So both Venus and Mars will be in Cassimi, right in the point in the heart of the Sun on January 7th. A very interesting day for it's a very Capricorn is a very like structural and constructive energy, so a great day to start in a long-term plan. Not so much for short-term satisfaction, which is something that is interesting looking at the fact that the ingress of Saturn is in Valentine's Day when all of those planets are parading through Aquarius this time. So like the Sun is going through Aquarius, Mars is going into Aquarius, Venus is going into Aquarius, and later Mercury is also going to go into Aquarius. Like all the personal planets are kind of like joining this same like kind of like a stellium parade from Capricorn and Aquarius. And this is not to be doomy in any way, because I don't think this is generally like the worst news, but we've had similar stelliums in Capricorn and Aquarius happening in previous times. One of them was famously 2020 when the pandemic, but another one was my generation, like generation of people born between 1991 and 1995, roughly. There was also a lot of planets piling up in both Capricorn and Aquarius. And those two times were times of deep change and deep, like, and both the times, as well as the people who were born on those times, were times of like, kind of like the structures that are moving the world changing a lot. So this is interesting because that shift and that parade of planets, all of them in that Capricorn, in that Saturnian, very constructive, very forward-looking energy of Capricorn into Aquarius is going to happen at the same time as we have the ingress of Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and all of them are going to conjunct Pluto. So we're going to get a lot of like deep Venus moment, deep Mars moment, deep Sun moment. So a lot of like really intense maxification of the energies of those planets as they go to Aquarius and to be nearby the ruler of this new Saturn Neptune conjunction, we have seen a little bit of, but I think the like big moment is still yet to come, which is kind of like that conjunction and right around zero Aries.
Absolutely. Does anybody have anything else to say to this? Because otherwise, I feel like we can actually talk about that conjunction. Okay. Okay, cool. So that the actual official Saturn Neptune conjunction, which I feel like we've already been experiencing roughly the last maybe 1.5 years, because Saturn is the slowest moving planet of the inner moving planets, and then obviously Neptune is super slow moving. All the outer planets are quite known to take years to go through signs. And so I always like to imagine this like a build up. So like we're going up a hill, and so the conjunction is happening on February 20th, the exact one at 0 degrees of Aries. But Saturn and Neptune have already been pretty close over the last like 1.5 years. And even right now, they're pretty close. I feel like a lot of people are already kind of feeling that they're kind of coming together. So I just want people to know that it's like, okay, like this moment is happening then, but even after they're separating, it's not like, okay, 20th of February happened, the conjunction happened, it's over. Like, no, it's gonna take 1.5 years as well for them to like slowly really separate and get out of engagement range. And I feel like even as long as Saturn is still in Aries, they're going to be co-present anyways. So I think it's actually very interesting that Saturn's whole journey through Aries, which is a sign where Saturn is fallen, is kind of almost being a bit cushioned with Neptune. I feel like Neptune definitely has a bit of that like protective layer it offers, or like a cushioning moment of making Saturn seem almost a bit less harsh. So I'm wondering how you guys are feeling about that. Not just the conjunction moment, but them traveling through Aries together for that time period.
Yeah, I think you touched on a valid point that, I often get frustrated when I see clickbaity astrology where people say, on February 20th, your life is going to change. It's really important that people need to have this awareness that, like, you'll need to consciously connect with your own chart to see what's been happening for a long time behind the scenes that is going to transpire and kind of come more into the fullness of its manifestation when Saturn and Neptune come together. I feel it would be akin to like a reset button. When a computer like is completely burnt out and you hold the button down for 5 seconds and then everything, it's like you force the manual shutdown. I kind of feel like the Saturn Neptune conjunction will be a bit like that. Like, let's force the manual shutdown because, the systems are overloaded. And
Mhm.
I like to think of Aries energy as well as like the purest, most direct simplification, bringing something back to the absolute bones and like getting rid of all the superfluous stuff that doesn't matter and just saying, well, what do I need to get from A to B? Let's like get rid of all of the frills and the detail. So I think people will get very clear maybe on what they need. I hope I'm answering this question properly now, or I might be going a bit off point. And also that, that Saturn and Neptune, what you touched on there about Neptune cushioning it. I think in a way it's like Neptune on its own can go unchecked and can be harmful, and then Saturn on its own can be severe. But together, it's like Saturn is that necessary, maybe restraint that will kind of guide the Neptune energy because Neptune can create a sense of, everybody wants to go after their dreams, Neptune and Aries, and start their amazing startups or be entrepreneurs. But Saturn is like, not so fast, slow down. Are you willing to get up at 5 a.m. every morning? Are you willing to do all the marketing? Do you realize all the hard work it takes? You can't be an overnight success. So it's this kind of idea that, you know, the people who are willing to do the work, the people who are willing to be disciplined, will see more success. And if you think about fire energy in general, I always think when we look at the four elements that fire is probably the hardest one maybe to control. Because I think about fire, I think about a wildfire and how many times have wildfires, gotten out of control and they come and they really can't get them under control. And people, they saw that in like one of the wealthiest areas in the world last year, in California, where their homes were literally devoured by fire. And these are the richest people in the world couldn't control fire. And I thought it was such, symbolically and metaphorically, it just shows that without restraint, fire energy can be harmful. So Saturn and Neptune is about like that restraint that is actually sometimes good. And yes, it's fallen in Aries, but I think every planet, even the ones in detriment, are the ones that are fallen have a lot more to teach us sometimes than the ones that are exalted. So like there's a lot of wisdom there with Saturn. Yeah, that they're my thoughts on it. What do you think, Duna?
So I have two ways of looking at this, or two thoughts that come. First that comes to mind is that yeah, Saturn is falling in Aries, but it's also in Aries triplicity, and it's also in a diurnal, like a diurnal Saturn, which both things can very constructive and can be things that actually like build things instead of just destroying things. Aries is an energy that is very conducive to the building of structures. And the second thought I have is just looking from a mundane astrology point of view, the Saturn Neptune conjunctions have historically been coincidental with a lot of important moments in the Soviet Union, particularly, and in revolutions in general, both in terms of like being present as a conjunction moments where revolution happened, and being present moments like the fall of the Soviet Union wall was with a Saturn Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. But Capricorn is a sign that is way more about the falling of structures, way more about the night, and about the part of Saturn that is more like kind of like letting everything like dissolve so you can see what's behind the mountain. So I think that in this case, I totally agree with Katrina that like on a personal level, it's very difficult that you're gonna get to like the 20th of February and the suddenly was like, oh yeah, my life has changed completely. Tomorrow, I'm a completely different person. For sure, for some people, might happen. Like some people, especially if they have this conjunction, like right in an angle or right in a very important planet, and they maybe get, I don't know, a new job or fired from the job. Depends on a lot of like the configurations and the um, temperament of the planets in their own chart. But for a lot of people, it's not gonna be like that. February 20th, day after, day before. I do think that around the conjunction, we will start to see probably the build of some different type of a structure. And because it's Saturn Aries, which yeah has triplicity and is a diurnal Saturn, which are great things, but it's also in fall, which is kind of like an unconventional part of Saturn. We'll probably see the start of structures that are unconventional and different to what the war structure brings to our minds. And because since we have started in this Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius era, I have seen a lot of like change in how people perceive technology. I can see the co-presence of Saturn and Neptune in Aries as a movement also in how people perceive technology and kind of a rethinking of that technology. Because it's a sextile, I don't think it's gonna be particularly violent. Like I don't, even if it's this is like fire and an air sign, so maybe yes, maybe there is violence implied, but like I don't think the general energy is that of a square of like a tension with what we've seen with Aquarius and with like the sort of like technologification of everyday life that Pluto in Aquarius has brought. But I do see a change in how we approach building our lives within within that techno world. Um, yeah, I think that's my I don't know if it's a prediction, but my vibe in general is like the energy of Saturn in Aries is like way like very constructing, but like in a way that is not it's not the construction that you it's not like I'm gonna build a building and I put this one and this one and this one and this. It's another different thing. So we'll see how they adapt to that new way of like constructing reality.
Mhm. Yeah, I really like what both of you said. I certainly feel that definitely when we talk about planets and fall or detriment, they resource in other ways, and I feel like especially with it's a Mars sign. Aries is a Mars sign. So it's like, how can I survive? But like with unconventional tools and resources. And because it's like there is no real plan. Like the Sun in Aries has like a plan, but Saturn in Aries doesn't really, or like it thinks it has a long-term plan, but it's like I don't really know how to break it down in steps to actually get there. And so I always feel like, and crisis is kind of a Mars word, but crisis lends itself to opportunity, which I think is a lot about this upcoming year. Like 2026, I think is a lot about crisis, but lending itself to opportunity as well. And I like to bring the metaphor of even though I'm not a gamer at all, but I like the metaphor of thinking as if we've unlocked a new world map in a game. And now it's like, okay, well, there's new areas to explore, there's new monsters to fight, there's new things to do, and but everything is a bit like overwhelming because we don't really know where where everything is at. So there's a lot of like exploring, and Aries also kind of being the first sign of the zodiac. It is literally kind of a rebirth in a new world. I liked what you said about like hitting that reset button, which I think is very necessary. Definitely not going to be easy, but I don't think that next year is meant to be easy at all. It's fire energy. It's firing us up to do something. But I do think certainly now I'm noticing the difference of Saturn and Neptune moving back into Pisces, that it feels a lot more hopeless. Like people
Yeah.
are a lot more overwhelmed because it's like this Jupiter Venusian realm of Pisces where it's like, oh, it's too much. I'm just gonna endlessly scroll on social media. Like I can't handle this. But with Aries, Saturn and Neptune, Aries, it's Mars energy. So it's like, okay, maybe there is a lot of nihilism. I hope I'm pronouncing that word right. Uh, but there is an urge to do something about it. So it's like, okay, maybe this world sucks right now, but what can I actually do right now about it? Which I think is gonna be helpful for a lot of people. And right now, people are feeling pretty hopeless because we are in the end stages of that. And I've also noticed these big trends around people really kind of like grieving the old social media days right now, which are such an echo to when a lot of social media was kind of birthed, which was around a time where Neptune was just entering the sign of Pisces. A lot of dating apps were created around that time, like 2012 and all of that. So we are, I feel like right now, mourning that digital world that a lot of us know in the time where it was, I don't know, a free time, even though certainly I'm not trying to like glamorize my teenage Tumblr phase at all. I feel like right in my memory, it seems like, oh, it was so nice, but like it wasn't really. So I think a lot of that is happening right now. And I do certainly think, and y'all can tell me your opinions afterwards, that with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, there's going to be a big urge to do more things in real life again. Because it's like Aries wants that raw thing, that real thing. Like I want to do th in-person things. So I do think we will move away from social media or have a new relationship with it, even though with Uranus entering Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius, certainly the technological advancements aren't going to stop. If anything, they're going to just accelerate. But we're going to have a new relationship with how we are like dealing and engaging with it. I'm curious what you have to say about all of this.
Yeah, I agree about the social media. I see the death of social media in its current form and a move more towards more service oriented, creativity oriented social media. You know, this idea that people want to look at what you had for dinner or your cup of coffee, you know, it's almost like Aries energy is like nobody cares. Nobody cares. Like, unless you're doing something purposeful, something meaningful, something that advances people, something that helps. You know, this is what we need to be sharing, content that is service oriented, that will like help the collective with Pluto and Aquarius. So this kind of, and North Node in Aquarius will reflect this energy, of course, when we get to that point. You know, this kind of this kind of self-obsession that, you know, has kind of permeated social media. Neptune and Pisces led a lot of people to think, you know, social media made them like, you know, a movie star of their own life, you know. They got to put on like all dramatic music to like the most mundane things that were happening in their world. So it will definitely, I like what you said about the relationship because, you know, that's it's kind of a choice we'll make to say, you know what, I might delete my personal social media. Why do I need to share my face? Why should I share my children's face, etc.? Like that's going to really come to a big stop because like children have been exploited on social media as like little accessories. Like parents, you know, have been showing their children off like handbags on social media, you know, making memes with their children. There's been so much abuse on social media that's been so subtle with Neptune and Pisces, and people have been in so much denial about it. So I think Neptune and Aries is going to be like this line in the sand, you know, enough is enough. And the one thing about the chart that, you know, makes me like, I wouldn't say uneasy, but makes me cautious about the Saturn Neptune conjunction is that Mars is applying to square Uranus, you know, in the coming days, you know, and then you know, Mars, I don't know if either of you believe in degree theory, but 22 degrees, you know, was always a violent degree. So, in degree theory, so it can, in Aquarius, can be a kind of a like one thing I would say is like I would avoid protests around the Saturn Neptune conjunction, you know, just from a health and safety point of view, because you can go to a protest with the best intentions, you know, Pluto and Aquarius, power to the people, but protests can get out of control very easily under this energy. And Saturn and Neptune as well, if we think of Aries energy as a leader, you know, Saturn Neptune conjunction with the Mars applying to square Uranus at the final degrees of Taurus, it could, you know, be you know and possibly maybe some kind of it could be an online attack or it could be you know attack of finances or money or funds with Taurus energy or it could you know be an attack on an individual like a leader somebody prominent in society that creates a bit of a financial reset or some sort of a global reset. Saturn and Neptune and Aries will be some sort of a reset globally. Hopefully, nothing too drastic, too dramatic, but there will be upheaval with Mars and Uranus involved, you know, and it will definitely change the way we approach social media.
Mhm.
Do you want to add anything to that, Duna?
Oh, to me also, I would definitely, and this is maybe not a prediction as so much as like something to watch out for. I think we will see the signification of Saturn, Neptune in Aries when the personal planets start making aspects to it. When they start, like when they start conjuncting it, because we have first the ingress, the Aries ingress, that's gonna be right on, like right on the conjunction of Saturn Neptune. So that because the according to a lot of astrologers, the Aries ingress kind of like tilts the whole year, like kind of like gives the energy of the whole year. Then we also have Venus conjoined in both of them somewhere March, if I'm not wrong, and then in April, Mars is gonna be there as well. So those conjunctions, I feel, are gonna give us like more of the vibe or like the change or shift on tone. And I also thought something else, but it left my mind, so it will come back. I hope so.
All good. Yeah. Yeah, I think certainly that energy, and again, maybe Neptune is serving as a bit of a cushion, but I think generally just Saturn in Aries has a lot of burnout energy. but it's like this necessary place, and that's often what Mars needs to do because Mars kind of needs to be pushed in the corner to be like, oh, now I want to fight. Otherwise, it's like not always moving. It's very like survivalistic life force energy, Mars. And so in this case, of course, yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of like upheaval, but we need to also reach that point, and I think that is probably going to be that point where it's like we feel so pushed in that corner where it's like now we need to change. Like now it's like that is that moment, and I do think that is going to be that moment. And Duna, did it come back to your mind what you wanted to say?
Yes, just
Okay,
now.
cool. Okay, great, 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 great.
As you were saying it. Thank you. Okay, so a couple of things. One, I feel like you both are very right on the part of like the Neptune in Pisces and the Saturn in Pisces energy that made a lot of people, on the one hand, all the time that Neptune was in Pisces, and particularly when Jupiter was also there, be very addicted to their phones and very like escaping reality. And then when Saturn went over it, there was a lot of like new sober movement, new ways of like rethinking sobriety, rethinking addiction, like figuring out that maybe what we have with our phones is also addiction. I think a lot of that, once Neptune is in Aries, is gonna become revelatory. Like people are gonna realize the real effect of this in their life. And not to be like this, I'm not trying to so say to anyone in particular, but I think it will also affect a lot to people who are trying to profit of that. So I think when Neptune is in Aries, and especially with Saturn there, if you're trying to sell nothing, or to sell air, or to sell, like if you're trying to tell someone, hey, I have this, if you book an astrology session with me, your life will be completely solved. That is gonna go very badly. Like that could have been going well while Neptune was in Pisces because everyone was kind of like enamored by the idea of a solution. But once it goes into Aries, I feel like it's gonna reveal a lot of the sort of like spiritual bad practices, and not only spiritual. I'm focusing because we're talking in a podcast that is about astrology. It feels like the perfect place to show this. But I don't think it's only astrology. I think all sorts of like new age practices that have been really like run rampant with Neptune in Pisces and have like not have any structure or any sense of like history. All of them are gonna put to the test with Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries, and are gonna put to the test as how much of this is like trying to sell air or to sell nothing, and how much is actually like real, like rooted spirituality with like reflection and like history and all of that. I think that is gonna be a main topic, and I think the fact that the Sun ingressing, so the Aries 0 points ingress coincides with that conjunction makes 2026 a particularly important year for that. On the other hand, that could very much mean a witch hunt of some sort. And I am already seeing that in kind of like how the United States treats like any sort of like how they promote some part of pseudoscience and demonize some other part. Like with the whole um Tylenol causes autism and all those things that they're doing. So they're gonna be like 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 all of those ideas are gonna be put to the test, and it's gonna be probably really harsh and really like mm, awakening to like all the things that we just took for granted when Neptune was in Pisces. If that makes sense, I would say as a year, not like again, not the same day or something like that, but like as a year.
I love that. Yeah, I really agree with you, Duna. I think Saturn and Neptune Aries as well will really highlight, nobody's coming to save you. Stop outsourcing your intuition to people, that are capitalizing on the fact that you're so disconnected from your intuition and you're seeking a savior, you're seeking a quick fix. You know, you with Saturn, Neptune, Aries, it's like you need to save yourself. You need to be empowered. You need to step out of victim consciousness and see, you know, these people for what they are. Unfortunately, a lot of charlatans, you know, on the internet. And I guess it goes back to Neptune and Pisces as well, the age of the internet, how it allowed the proliferation of all these people, you know, and this industry to go so unregulated. And astrology is just one industry, but like there's loads, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, in the holistic industry that are so unregulated. And, you know, people have terrible side effects and are quite traumatized after, you know, lots of unethical services. So there could be a bit of restriction even around, you know, our kind of work, you know, who knows? And a need to maybe have more like standards or ethics or practices in place to safeguard people, unfortunately, from their own naivety, you know?
I also think about
Yeah.
the fact that Saturn exaltation is in Libra, and that is very much judgment. So I see that Saturn in Aries like transit as well as kind of like that that sort because it's an opposition always has the energy of the opposite, right? So like kind of like as a judgment, as a big judgment of like, okay, but what are you like when you say you know something, when you say you're gonna fix someone's life, what does that mean? Are you really gonna fix someone's life? Because that is a very bold statement to make,
Mhm.
and it has consequences to just make that statement and then don't do it.
Mhm. Yeah, I love what you said. Certainly, I heard Chris Brennan talk about this as well already a few years ago, where yeah, it was. I feel like, and obviously we're going to see that only now, where even maybe the astrology community has taken a bit for granted how huge of a boom it became during that whole like Neptune and Pisces year, and that it might also be a bit harsh on exactly these types of professions. Again, in one way, it's probably a good thing because
Yeah.
it's gonna, for lack of better words, like wield people away that never really like took it seriously. But it's also gonna, yeah, people are probably gonna question it a lot more. And it might not be as big of a boom as it used to be, but my hope for astrology is that it's something that it's talking about the things that are going on. It's always like kind of separated in that way, where it's like we can see that astrology is maybe going to go through harsher times through knowing what the astrology is doing in an ironic way. So in
Yeah.
that way, I guess we can prepare well. And I mean, astrology has always proliferated throughout thousands of years because I think people in whatever times are always gonna have the same old question, which is that above the same as this down below? Like, does it say something? Like, that's never
As
gonna,
above, so below.
exactly, as above, so below. Like, it's never gonna, that question is never gonna go out. And I think even sometimes through crises moments, maybe it's just, again, and that's what you said is like, we're gonna have to look at, oh, can we have, I don't know, better systems of education that people really like have, I don't know, a certificate, even though I don't think certificates are the only way that somebody fully knows something, but I do think regulations might also be useful in that way because again, nowadays it's, I mean, I could go on a whole tangent about how some random TikTok girly is like 25 degrees, if you have planets at 25 degrees, it means you're cursed. And it's like, okay, great. There's no context whatsoever. So, in that way, I do think, and I like what you said, Duna, about it. It's like we're gonna, like, we can't just make claims anymore. There needs to be some like real realness behind what we are trying to do or sell, or I don't know, or try to provide is maybe the better word for people. Yes. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add for that Saturn Neptune conjunction? If not, we can talk about more fire energy that is also happening in February. Again, I feel like February is quite a loaded month with many things happening. We're astrologers, Western astrologers for the most part, I would say. So it's not like we know the Chinese zodiac so well, unless someone here right now wants to be like, I'm a pro at Chinese astrology. But I do think it's always worth looking at that as well. And I think it's very significant the fact that we are entering the year of the fire horse. Basically, I'm like, see, another culture like across the ocean is echoing the same sentiment and archetypal layer to something that we're also talking about here. Like that seems very, very interesting. And I'm curious what you have to say because I know historically fire horse years have been known to be linked to quite a lot of upheaval and unrest so far. And it really fits with the fire energy that a lot of planets are also going to experience this year.
Well, I don't claim to know much about Chinese horoscopes or astrology, but I've always followed them. Even when I was a child, I was obsessed. So I was born in the year of the tiger, and I'm a primary school teacher. So I teach small children. And one year I had a particularly unruly class, and I was at my wit's end. And I never check children's birth charts because it's just from an ethical point of view. But I would have an idea of, their generation, what Neptune generation they were, what Pluto generation, Saturn, etc. But I couldn't get a handle on this class. And I was like, why won't they sit down? And then the Chinese New Year came around, and I realized that my class were born in the year of the horse. And it changed my approach to teaching them because I realized, wow, this is why they're so restless. I have a class full of horses, basically they need to move, they need to be active. So it made me really like look at Chinese astrology and take it far more seriously. And I still remember that class. They were very creative, very dynamic, restless, and lots of fun. So much fun. And I didn't, they didn't need to change. I needed to change my approach to how I was teaching them. And when I did, I had a better year with them. And, they weren't necessarily bold, but they just couldn't sit down. And this was frustrating for me because I was trying to do, the orthodox approach to sitting down and writing. So I allowed more movement in the classroom. I let them have more freedom to roam and I introduced more dance and movement into my lessons. And suddenly I had their attention. And these horses, I wouldn't say they were tamed, but they were ready to run with me. So when we approach this year of the horse, I think about that class that I had, 12 years ago. I think, wow, like, there are 12 animals in the Chinese zodiac. Am I wrong? Am I 12 years?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought, yeah, like they were great teachers for me because they taught me the importance of movement. That you can learn as you move, you can learn as you go, that you don't need, to have everything so structured. Some people learn better or they focus better when they're standing up or when they're kneeling or when they're on the floor or and I think, if we look at the year of the horse from that lens, you can think, okay, well, it's going to be a year where we're going to probably want to move, want to go places, and it mightn't necessarily be about the destination. It might be more about the journey. It might be more about just that need to be active. So I do think year of the horse is for movement. So like people might move, might travel, and might go places and might find it difficult to maybe stay at home. It's a year where people just want to have freedom and be a bit wilder or explore things maybe they haven't explored before or do things in maybe an unconventional way. But that's my own, interpretation because as I said, I don't know a whole pile about the Chinese zodiac, so I don't claim to. My lived experience.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to that. I don't know a lot about the Chinese zodiac. I do want to say that Alice Sparkly Cat, who's one of my favorite astrologers, period, has courses on the Chinese zodiac, and I'm definitely gonna take one of those some year. I couldn't this year, so maybe like in the future when we do another one of those, I will be more like well informed. But I tend to not talk a lot about what I'm not well informed. But they do publish articles about that, so I'm putting that out as a resource if anyone wants to dig onto it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's great. I certainly again I'm also not like a pro in Chinese zodiac sign, but I do think it's worth mentioning it here just because
Yeah,
of the thing that I said before. It's like there's really this fire
fire
incentive that is kind of going on globally and also numerology wise, we're going from a year 9 to a year 10,
10.
which is 1. So we're starting something
The
new. So
wheel,
exactly.
the
It's
wheel in the tarot.
it's definitely a new start. And this year, I think, has been 2025 has been a very threshold type of year. I feel like I said that word so many times I cannot even say it anymore. But because we've been going, a lot of planets have been going back and forth between Aries, Pisces, and I do think even that is just Aries and Pisces are so different. I feel like it's one of the most like cutoff moments all in the zodiac sign. And now we're really like, okay, we've passed through the threshold. Right now we're still in it. But in February for sure, like that is a time where it's like, bam, we're going there. Because the Chinese New Year, I don't have a date noted here yet, but it is, oh yeah, because it's going to be on the solar
The new
eclipse
moon,
in,
isn't it?
exactly, but it's going to
Yeah.
be a solar eclipse even on February 17th. So that's happening. And we can maybe talk about
Yes.
this now because
The
uh,
eclipses.
yes, eclipses, because that's like the first eclipse that is greeting us. And so we have, right, Neptune moves into Aries, end of January. We have Saturn moving into Aries, 14th of February. We have the eclipse, the solar eclipse in Aquarius on February 17th. And just a few days later, February 20th, we have that Saturn Neptune conjunction. So, wow, that's a lot. And that solar eclipse in Aquarius, Aquarius being ruled by a Saturn that just like freshly moved into Aries. So that's gonna be an interesting eclipse. And the other one that we're gonna have is on March 3rd, lunar eclipse in Virgo. The nodes are slowly gonna shift from the Pisces Virgo axis into the Leo Aquarius axis. I did not put the exact date here on. There are also people that some use the mean nodes, some use the true nodes, which might shift the dates around a bit. I don't know if any of you guys know the exact date the nodes move, because this is going to be an out of sign eclipse, the Aquarius one on February 17th. If
No,
any,
because it changes so much with the. Let me check my notes because I do have some notes. Well,
yeah, I
keep
definitely have
talking.
it
Notes. I
somewhere
think
as
I have my
well.
notes for the planets, but not the nodes. Hang on, and I'll get them though. So the nodes leave Pisces on the 18th of August.
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
have it like that as well. Yes, so it's going to be in and
Yeah,
it
18.
happens and this happens very often when the nodes have not like when they're at the end or the beginning of a sign, we often get what we call out of sign eclipses. So
Mm-hmm.
that just means that the moons are close enough to the ecliptic line, which is how the eclipses are formed, and they are formed based on where the nodes of the moon are. So important to notice, right? I feel like a
Mm.
lot of people don't know that. So the solar eclipse we're getting in Aquarius is when the nodes are still technically in Pisces and Virgo, so it's an out of sign eclipse. Doesn't mean it's any less powerful, especially with ruling Saturn that has freshly
Yeah.
ingressed into Aries. So I'm curious what you guys have to say about that.
For that first eclipse, I'm actually looking at the full moon eclipse. Sorry. Do you want to discuss the new moon first, I should say?
The
Or is it the full moon we're looking at? Which one are we looking at here now? I
okay,
pulled up
so
another chart.
yeah,
Sorry,
no,
The
now.
new moon is a solar eclipse in Aquarius. It's a new moon.
Yes. Okay, I'm looking at the right one. So hang on one second now.
yes,
Yes, yes,
February
I have
17th.
it. Yeah, yeah. Like what
Okay.
I find interesting about that chart is that there is no Earth energy apart from Uranus and Taurus, which is like an outer generational planet. And I always find that kind of a bit unnerving when there's like a chart with no Earth, because you know that people are going to be extremely ungrounded and really wired, maybe up in their emotions or impulsive. And it's not easy when there is no Earth energy, because people can feel extremely insecure. It can be difficult financially and globally, and also when there is only one planet in an Earth sign, inner or outer, that planet has to work really hard. It's like there's this lonely planet with no friends, so to speak. It's like nobody's trying, no one sends help. And Uranus and Taurus isn't the most stable type of Earth energy. It's still shaky because it's Uranus. So there's just, I feel like there's a lot of moving plates for that, that first significant eclipse that we have on the 17th of February. And yeah, like I do think that it's going to make people feel a bit, perhaps like a little bit shaky. So like one remedy I always give when I don't see a lot of earth is, get grounded, go outside, be in nature, try not to be in your head. Easier said than done when you have a stellium of planets in air, and a lot of water energy as well in the sky, and fire energy too. So that would be my advice for the eclipses. And I always find eclipses are difficult to interpret. I try to not interpret them almost, because I feel like they were eclipses keep astrologers humble. That's their design. It's like this energy of, you think you're trying to manipulate things and control things, astrologer, but you don't know what you're dealing with. This is the nodes. Yeah, so that's my take on eclipses usually.
Do you want to say something, Duna, or?
Mm. See, we're gonna go over each one of the eclipses now, because I feel like I have more thoughts on the nodal story, like on the nodes when they're gonna change, and like the fact that we have eclipses now in both like Pisces and Virgo, than on the specific eclipse. Because similarly to Katrina, I don't tend to be very predictive about eclipses. I think eclipses are a time where you like things are chaotic. You don't see the sun, you don't see the moon. They don't work as they're supposed to work. So, and especially in Aquarius, way more so. I have that feeling of like it could mean anything. It could, and because I feel like we have seen the kind of like ugly side of Aquarius with all the tech lures and the yeah, and all of that, like all of the kind of like innovations that have felt so dreadful to a lot of people. I don't want to make any sort of like doomeries predictions when probably it's being an eclipse and most probably it's gonna surprise me as well. So, but I do have thoughts about the notes, but we can go around there later.
Oh yeah, no, I think we can talk. Let me just say like when the eclipses are happening for the year, because we're getting four eclipses, just so people know the dates and when to look out for, and we don't have to talk
Mhm.
specifically about the eclipses because again, as you said, they are hard to predict, and I don't think their point is to even be predicted. Because I like what you said, right? It's a pretty humbling time for an astrologer to go through the eclipse portal. And it almost has a bit of like this Uranian feel to it, where it's, for me, oftentimes it feels like there is this like portal that is open, and it feels like the air seems almost electrified, and time and fate and fortune just work differently. It sets you towards the right path in the course, but that is so like, how do I know what that is for the world right now? Like, I don't know. And they certainly function like full and new moons, but on steroids. So they're like extra powerful. And sometimes they're felt even a month in advance. Like, I've definitely had instances where the eclipse is like 1 month in advance. I'm feeling the effects of it. So they definitely are powerful, but they are formed through the nodal axis, which they are on the ecliptic line. So it's definitely worth talking about them. And now let me say the dates. So we already said on the February 17th, we get a solar eclipse in Aquarius. out of sign eclipse on March 3rd. We get a lunar eclipse in Virgo. And then we have a brief window where we have a break. And then in August, we get a total, on 12th of August, we get a total solar eclipse in Leo. Definitely that one I'm going to watch out for, just because Leo is ruled by the sun. And it's going to be interesting what happens when we can't fully see the sun, so to say. And then on August 28th, we're going to get a lunar eclipse in Pisces. Yes. So, but let's talk about the shift from Pisces, Virgo to Leo and Aquarius, because that's definitely going to be more significant in the story. I feel like when we talk about the eclipses, we're talking about like story arcs in our lives, because the nodes are always opposite each other. So they're activating a certain axis in our lives. And obviously, personally, if you want to watch what that is, you're going to have to look at, okay, which houses does Leo and Aquarius rule in my chart? Then you're kind of going to know which topics are going to be present in your life.
Okay, okay, going on to the notes. Well, first of all, before I go into the notes, the solar eclipse in Leo, the one that is August 12th, is gonna be, I'm just saying because it's a curiosity, but also because usually even the old astrologers said that it affected more the people who actually saw it. It's gonna be total solar eclipse and it's gonna be visible for 3 minutes in the region of I am well at least south of Europe. I think it's like from Madrid, which is where I live, south at least until Egypt, El Cairo, and like all that like all that part of the world, so like Italy, Greece, Palestine probably as well. I'm not sure about Iran. I will have to check it, but like all of that area is gonna be having in the middle of the day 3 minutes of total solar eclipse, so no light whatsoever. Which is always striking visually. It's one of those things that really makes you like understand how powerful astrology is because animals hide, the vegetation changes a little bit too. Like it's sort of like a really magical moment and it's gonna be visible there. So it will probably affect those areas and the people that are living in those areas as well as the socio-economical things that happen around that time in August. But now going about the nodes. So lately we've been having, and this is kind of like the old story, we've been having Saturn conjunct the North Node for a long time, or like being in the same sign as the North Node, which is it has been kind of one of the main features of the nodes being in with the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. When the nodes change, one of the main features is gonna be that Pluto is gonna be co-present with the North Node. It's not gonna conjoin it until 2027, maybe even beginning of 2028. So it's not part of the story of this year, that conjunction specifically, but it is in co-presence. So they're both ruled by the Saturn in Aries. They both sharing the same story and guiding themselves, both Rahu, the North Node, which amplifies things, and Pluto, which also amplifies things, are going to amplify the message that we get from Saturn in Aries. So that's very important because it's going to center way more the Saturn Aries topics that we already talked about. On the side of the South Node, though, we're going to have a co-presence of the South Node with Jupiter in Leo. And Jupiter in Leo is gonna conjunct the South Node. Let me look because I have that date on November 11th. But Mars is gonna be very close. So we're gonna have a kind of triple story there in the South Nodes of Mars, Jupiter, and the South Node. Now, what does all that mean? Because I just mentioned a lot of planets. Jupiter, especially in Leo, tends to make the amplify the need for being seen and representation in some way, like being Leo is a sign very much associated with kings, but if with each one of us, because of its association with the sun, but with each one of us is more like a desire to be a star, to be seen. And the South Node tends to make things smaller or tends to bring familiar patterns, tends to bring things from the past. So we might see a lot of opulence, a lot of like a comeback to like if what I saw to the world is what I am. That is too obviously of the past. Kind of like we might see a lot of like really extravagant displays of luxury. I think that's gonna be really amplified by Jupiter with the South Node, more so with Mars enters the picture, because Mars has the maleficence to that picture. That is kind of what I feel can be sort of the bias or the shadow vision of this South Node and Jupiter in Leo. And then also Jupiter is gonna oppose Pluto as well as soon as it enters Leo. So we are gonna have very much that Leo Aquarius tension, very, very magnified by Pluto, by Jupiter, and by Mars. A strong, very central planets are gonna make that axis of Aquarius and Leo be super relevant in our personal lives, so in whatever houses you have it, but also in general in the world. We're gonna have a really, really strong contrast between, because it's an opposition and because there's planets in both sides, a strong contrast between like the Leo need to feel special, to feel seen, to feel pampered, to even, and the Aquarius need for equality and for like be one with them, be like just one person more, not special, but like be just a decent person, or like more than decent, I would say a humble person. So we're gonna have like the tension between humility and the need for adoration in each one of our lives, as well as everywhere, very present this year. That is how I'm reading that change in the notes. But I don't know what Katrina and Amiya think about that.
I agree. I think you've touched on a really important point there with that nodal axis of Leo and Aquarius being activated. The need for, arrogance. It's a test of arrogance, a test of the ego. I always think Leo energy is beautiful, but you need to keep your ego in check. Like Leo gone wrong is egoic, and the ego is very fragile. So the South Node in Leo will definitely be like a karmic testing point for that. And like lavish displays of wealth online, you can see it already. People are finding it very extremely distasteful. And with the opposition from Pluto to all the Leo energy, it will actually be quite dangerous, I believe, now to share wealth online, to disclose your location if you're staying in a lavish place online. It's this celebrity worship. All of these things are going to be in poor taste, and it will almost be like, yeah, you've all this money, but are you happy? Are you doing something meaningful? Where is, the humanitarian side to all your work? Have you done any, is there any philanthropy? And we're going to see this with celebrities as well. If they don't stand for something, if they don't take stands, or if they don't align themselves with humanitarian causes, they are not going to keep their status, I believe, because the Aquarius energy and the North Node in Aquarius, it asks you to be part of something bigger than yourself and to step outside of your ego. And, it reminds me, and I don't actually know what era this was or the date, when Marlon Brando, rejected his Oscar, because he wanted to take a stand. I think it was for Native Americans. Someone can correct me now if I'm wrong. But it
Yes.
seemed like such an Aquarian ideal. This thing of, you know what, like if it's not everyone, I don't want it, I want equality. I want to create change for everyone. And people need to use their power and their influence in the right way. So if you have status, if you have influence, it's about, giving someone smaller than you a shout out. It's like, when you rise to the top, it's about not pulling up the ladder. It's leaving the ladder down so somebody else can climb up. That's what I think about with the Leo Aquarius energy. But I think it's going to be extremely interesting because we're going to have like, squares going on from Chiron and Taurus, even though that's going to be a long way off. But still, there's going to be lots of growth. And people who are aware, because if you think about the dragon's head and the dragon's tail, the tail is the part of the dragon, because it's cut off, that is really unaware and unconscious. So the unconscious Leo energy in you, where you're seeking approval, you're seeking validation through, status or wealth or showing off and not doing anything that's helpful or progressive for humanity. This unconscious energy will be brought to your attention. And, unfortunately, and I hate the word cancelled, I can see a lot of people being cancelled or falling from grace under this transit. And for people, we touched on the eclipses a bit, but for people that are really interested in interpreting it, I would say, look to the Leo Aquarius axis of your birth chart, look to the Virgo Pisces aspect axis of your birth chart, and think, where am I a little bit stuck there? Where do I need to change? Because the North Node is bringing in fated change that, isn't always something you want, but something you need. That's what I always see the North Node as, because it's usually uncomfortable change. The growth of the dragon's head is that uncomfortable change. So it's an invitation really from the nodes to step into that. And what's interesting, when I looked at the ingress chart for the node moving into Aquarius, Saturn is forming, like Venus is forming a weak opposition to Saturn, but she's approaching a Saturn. So that gives us a flavor, a Saturn Venus, opposition. Again, it's going to be connected to wealth, and Venus will be in Libra, so it's going to be connected to this need to be liked at all costs. But Saturn in Aries asks you to be real, to be authentic, because nobody wants this shallow version of yourself. People are really embracing authenticity now, particularly in online spaces. The more honest and raw you can be, the more flawed you are, the better. Like all of this curated energy that comes with Leoness, and maybe Libra energy too, that curation, that need for perfection, and that need for symmetry. The North Node in Pisces has pulled us away from that. It's like embrace the mess. And then the North Node in Aquarius is like, right, now on to the next thing. Now that you've embraced the mess and you've stepped out of perfectionism, now what are you going to actually do to leave a legacy that changes the world? Because North Node in Aquarius is like change the world energy, move away from the wealth. And if my memory serves me right, I have an awful feeling Elon Musk has the North Node in Aquarius, the South Node in Leo. And there you have like the richest man alive with the South Node in Leo, which tells you a lot about wealth. The North Node in Aquarius, you're meant to do something distinct and special to, advance humanity.
You were
Yeah.
correct. You were correct
Does he have
about
that?
Elon
Okay,
Musk.
wow.
Yes, and also Marlon Brando. Depends on, but the true north is just has just ingress in his chart
Oh,
in Leo
wow, cool.
Aquarius.
Thank you so much for checking, Duna. That's nice to hear.
Yes, and he also has a Saturn Venus opposition in
Wow.
the in Scorpio and Taurus. So that's interesting because it's calling to a lot of the paradigms and like archetypes that you were describing. So yeah, those two people like Marlon Brando and Elon Musk are opposite nodes. Marlon Brando has the
Mm.
North Node in Leo,
Oh.
and Elon Musk in Aquarius. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to play a bit of devil's advocate.
Yes.
Uh, 100% agree with everything you're saying. I think the nodes are very interesting because I feel like the node front in itself can be a bit tricky as well. And certainly Aquarius is very collective, but I'm just wondering if that as well can become potentially a performance we're doing, where people are, you know, doing charity for the sake of doing charity, not because they actually want to, but because they know that's the socially acceptable thing. Because Aquarius is an air sign, and air signs are all about our social structures and our relationship. Um, and so I feel like that's also, and I agree with what you said. I feel like especially in YouTube as well, I'm really seeing this incentive where people are like cheering on people that are relatable, where it's like, I don't want to watch and unpacking my $5,000 purchase of Louis Vuitton bags or something anymore. Like people are kind of almost sick of that. And they're like cheering on channels that are like, how I managed to live in Tokyo in an apartment for $15 a day or something like that. Like people want to know how the average person makes it work. Like that's what they want to know. But I'm wondering at the same time if people realize that's the cool thing because that's Aquarius. Aquarius is collective. And that's also Saturn. Like, are you in the club or are you outside of the club? And it almost has a bit of this vibe of certainly, and again, I'm thinking of the Tumblr days, but where it was super cool to be a hipster, where people were suddenly acting poor, buying these shitty phones and ripping their clothes to look poor, even though they spent like $100 on a vintage piece that looks thrifted but is actually new. I feel like that's certainly something that can also happen a bit with that North Node and South Node in Leo. It's like we're getting away from one performance, but almost getting into another performance, which is not so much how I want to come across, but like how do I want to come across to the group and performing, being like, oh, see, I'm cool. I have the same opinions, and I'm so like I feel like it's almost these rich people wanting to be relatable, just as back then people wanted so badly to be hipsters, even though they were like spending thousands of dollars on getting thrifted clothes or these vinyls. I'm never sure how to pronounce that word. So just wanted to put that out there as well. And that's I think the interesting thing about the nodes. They're always extremes. They always pull us in extremes. And they're never really uh like what Adam Ellenbus likes to often say is that it almost feels like a Chinese finger trap, where like you put both of his fingers in and it's hard to get out. And it's like the North Node is not better than the South Node is not better than the North Node. Both can go into extremes. And the North Node being Rahu being the head of the dragon is like very hungry for, yes, I want to be part of the social collective and see me do this good work for people and charity. So definitely just want to put out there like both of them can almost be a trap on either side. Um, but I certainly think it's a good direction that we are heading in. It's definitely going to bring up a lot of, yeah, our personal incentives and how we approach these topics in our own lives, really.
Yeah, I think the excesses we really have to watch out for it on both, but particularly because of Jupiter and Leo, I
Yes.
worry about Leo energy. But if Jupiter and Leo wasn't there, you know, if it was still Jupiter in Cancer, I don't think it would be such of an issue. But hopefully that the Jupiter and Leo will help people, who struggle to step into their light, to step into their fullness of their expression, to step into that lovely self-love era. That Jupiter and Leo will, help people with that. Well, I know we haven't talked about Jupiter and Leo yet in isolation, but the fact that Jupiter is going to square Chiron and Taurus, I think is a big indicator, when it ingresses, that people will kind of want to go towards something, but Chiron and Taurus will hold them back, almost say, yeah, they could do that, but you could never do that. Like you wouldn't be good enough to do that. This kind of your own negative rhetoric in your head will hold you back from stepping into Leo energy is quite bold and creative. Look at me. Listen to me. I'm telling a story. I'm going to embellish the story to hold your attention. Are you still listening to the story? It's this kind of energy. But Chiron and Taurus will definitely, it's like stage fright. It's going to be like, no, 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 don't go on stage. You're going to fail. You're going to forget your lines. So I think for some people, when they overcome that Jupiter Chiron square and step into that lovely Leo energy, it's going to be so healing. But other people who are maybe too far in it, like you mentioned, the person unboxing their Louboutins or whatever, like those people will just, will fall out of favor, like a natural decline, because it's just like the trend is evolving. It's moving towards that thing of how to survive, in Tokyo for $15 a day. That's helpful. That's helpful. That you're providing a service to humanity. Thank you. I'm going to follow you.
I do want to say that I like the devil's advocate vision of Amiya because having Jupiter on one side of the nodes and Pluto in the other side, I see that danger. Like I see a huge danger of either of those sides becoming too big. Because that's what Pluto and what Jupiter do. Like the nodes by themselves, and especially Rahu, the North Node, right? Can be particularly like tend to excesses, but Jupiter also is, and Pluto also is, and both of them are gonna play in the theater of the nodes. So now when we're looking at the at Rahu, our Ketu, when we're looking at the dragon, we're looking at a dragon that has like two giant balls of fire in its sides. So it's I can totally see the need to play devil's advocate here and to be like, don't fall into like posting things online just because you think they're relevant, donating to charity just to not feel bad, because those are impulses that go kind of like feast the dragon, and it's not like nobody's perfect. It's not like you must avoid the dragon. Don't think about the dragon, right? No, it's not that, but it's definitely being aware that we are stepping into a couple of years in which it's gonna become extremely easy to be excessive in one way or another, and for that to be really showcased in the world because of the way that Rahu and Ketu are playing with Pluto and Jupiter.
Okay, everyone, we are back from a little break. We are entering the second part of our transit talk for the year of 2026. And we previously were talking about the eclipses. Now we're going to talk about the next ingress, which is actually still happening fairly at the beginning of the year. But I feel like most of this astrology that is very significant is kind of like happening at the beginning of the year, which is the 26th of April. We have Uranus moving into the sign of Gemini for good as well. We have, as a matter of fact, also briefly experienced Uranus in Gemini this year, but now Uranus is back in Taurus again too. But next year, Uranus too, just like Saturn and Neptune, fully going into the other signs for good, not retrograding back into the previous signs. So again, further emphasizing that this really is a threshold year and that next year only like the real thing begins because we are fully entering new chapters. There is no going back. So, who wants to start with talking about Uranus in Gemini?
I feel like maybe I should start this one as a
Sure.
Gemini, as a resident Gemini. Um, so what we had so far of Uranus in Gemini has been, as we kind of like a lot of astrologers kind of like pinpointed, rapid advancements in technology development and a lot of like the AI,
AI.
sorry, AI, thank you. AI, and the just what feels like a bubble, like an economic bubble of like a lot of like different ways of like looking at this technology, using this thing, new methods of communication, new learning things, new which has not been probably like the best in terms of like bringing a stability to people, but Gemini is unstable, so that makes a lot of sense. For a historical precedent, Uranus and Gemini coincided last time with the last bits of the World War II and all the advancements in technology that happened right after World War II and kind of like because of World War II. So the last ingress, I don't want to get like super doomy because I don't think this is gonna be. This is ingress is not exactly the same vibe in general, skywise. But the last ingress of Uranus in Gemini was when the United States entered the World War II and bombed Hiroshima. That coincided with the ingress. And Uranus is in Gemini in the chart of the United States, in the natal chart with Mars co-present. So those two things make it quite likely that this transit of Uranus in Gemini at some point is very relevant for all both the United States history, which makes a lot of sense because it has been trembling, especially this last year, and also all the various conflicts that we're seeing happening in the world. Things are gonna move much quicker. Things are gonna be much faster in terms of technology, in terms of probably also war, in terms of travel. There's a lot of talk as well, and this is not necessarily to do with Uranus and Gemini, but it will affect Uranus and Gemini at some point. There's a lot of talk about the era of air because the Saturn Jupiter conjunctions now are in air signs. They have been being in air signs for a while, and the Saturn Jupiter conjunctions are called the great conjunctions because it's like kind of like the way that the ancient astrologers used to measure great changes in time. And this air conjunction and past air conjunctions had a lot to do with like extensive travel through very different mediums and living life kind of more like a network than like a stable uh, unique place. Like it's more about the nomadic life and less about the city or the center of the city. So even cities themselves are becoming more like distributed, where the most important things that happen in cities in this past year have also been kind of the outskirts of the city, and cities are becoming kind of unaffordable to live in the center of them. So I see a lot of that in Uranus and Gemini. I see a lot of decentralization. I see a lot of like networks of things happening. On the positive side, networks of support, networks where people can rely on various different peoples in various different parts of the world. And on the negative side, we already went over it, I feel, with the AI and the all the other kind of like shadows that we can see both with Pluto in Aquarius and with Uranus and Gemini of the technology not having the best interests of the people in mind sometimes. And both of these are in a trine with Neptune sextiling in the middle. So those three stories are very intertwined. And I don't know if Caitriona or Amiya has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying, Duna. And I think it's so interesting that you bring up the USA's chart because Uranus is transiting, will be transiting their seventh house again. And we can really see, since, 2025, a palpable shift, a change in direction, cutting ties with previous allies has been a big one. And what's interesting about Europe in the context of the European Union chart is that it's a Leo rising. And, you've got the ingress of Pluto there in the seventh house, this power struggle. And Europe has that Scorpio stellium as well. And now we see, all this movement around, militarization and arms. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. But going back to Uranus and Gemini, another thing that I definitely could see happening with Uranus and Gemini, if I just think of it in isolation, is changes to education. Because I always think that Gemini rules, those third house themes of early education. And I could see, education becoming a bit more automated maybe, or a bit more, children might have more autonomy or more, options. I actually want to study these subjects, less maybe formal, like moving away from formal education and recognizing as well, the children's brains are, they're so their brains are so amazing in that they're like sponges and they can learn really, really quickly. And Uranus and Gemini might show us that, and innovative ways of approaching or alternative ways of approaching education. It wouldn't surprise me if more children opt for homeschooling or move away from traditional education, or if traditional education has a radical overhaul that like is really groundbreaking, in the next decade. And I imagine technology will facilitate, a lot more remote learning. And I could see a lot of people changing the way they work as well because of, we have this Saturn and Neptune and Aries, sextile energy co-present. So like if parents are working differently or working remotely or traveling for work, I could see children, learning and being educated differently as well. So I think people are going to look at things differently. The thing is about Gemini energy, what I love about Gemini energy is the chaotic nature of it. And that if you ask a Gemini, they always have an answer. Geminis are like, somebody, I think it was a podcast I was listening to recently. If you have a Gemini in your house, you don't need ChatGPT. And I thought that was just such a brilliant analogy for Gemini, because they have the most random answers, and they have so many like unrelated facts in their heads. So I feel that like it's going to really show how quickly we'll be able to get access to information and knowledge. But my hope is that because Saturn, is kind of there in a helpful aspect, that it will you know, that it will at some point get to the point where the knowledge is more reliable. Because at the moment, and I think this could be Neptune's influence too, you have people that go, oh, well, ChatGPT told me this, or ChatGPT, and it's often inaccurate. So I'd love to see like more discernment around it. But I do think Uranus and Gemini, negatively, we could see issues around air quality. And I think Pluto and Aquarius will exacerbate that. And we will look at ways of improving air quality. And Chiron and Taurus as well will kind of make us more aware of, how we are. I hate the word raping the land, but that's the best word I have. Like we exploit the earth's resources and then we wonder why we're sick, why we have so many respiratory illnesses, etc. So I do think there could be like an increase in respiratory illnesses, that they will spread quickly and fast. But I equally feel that like remedies or cures will also be found. Or vaccines or whatever will be found quickly too, because this trine energy will create like the easy spread of news, information, and airborne illness. Yet it can also create faster remedies too, so it can work to our advantage. But those are just some of my thoughts, general thoughts about Uranus and Gemini. I think it's a really exciting transit.
I certainly think that it works a lot better. Like Uranus works a lot better in Gemini, as a sign, because Gemini tends to be a bit erratic and chaotic, right? And that's kind of the energy of Uranus in and of itself. Uranus and Taurus certainly I feel like has felt kind of difficult because Taurus is usually the sign that we associate with stability, and and Uranus there is like the opposite of that. So I do think that at least Uranus is going to work quite well there. At the same time, planets working well in a sign always can tend to lead to overwhelm, because if something functions too good, it can be a bit overwhelming. And I think that's the part of information. And certainly it's like information can be spread a lot easily, but it's also like, where do we discern? Even already now, we are being overloaded all the time. It's certainly not natural for our nervous systems to go on Instagram and I look and see a story about someone's cat that passed away, and the next story is a meme, and then the next story, like it's like so much information all at once about people I might not even care this deeply about, for lack of a better word. It's like you're being bombarded with so many things. And I certainly hope that the sextile from Saturn and Neptune will lead to us at least being a bit more aware about that, taking conscious time off of social media. I said this before. I feel like we're at the threshold right now with technology where it's definitely not going to stop advancing. If anything, it's going to just accelerate in advancement. But we are at a place where we almost merged so much with it, where now we can create a different relationship to it because it almost got like we're basically like intertwined with it almost. And I feel like, and again, this is not necessarily a prediction, but it's where I would like to see things going, where it's like when we say I'm going to take time off, it really means like I'm not going to be on my phone. Like I'm gonna take time off of social media because right now it feels like before we went to social media to escape our real lives, and now it's like we need to go live real life to escape social media because we're so in that world all the time. And I do think the question that and question is a big Gemini word. Gemini loves questions is what is knowledge even? What is education? What does it mean to know something? Um, and I think with these interesting constellations of the fact that the outer planets are all either trining or sextiling each other, I think it will make us aware of what the problems actually even are. I feel like right now we might not even know exactly, like we're kind of tapping in the dark. And then once we're aware of it, then we're going to be able to find the solution or ask the right question, the Gemini, to be able to then solve the problems. Because I feel like we really underestimate the power of the right questions. It's not necessarily the answer, but it's like the right question can really open this world and this vortex where it's like, oh, yeah, I haven't thought about that before. What can we do about that? And I do think that's going to be, yeah, very imposant in how it's going to play out and how we're going to deal with that and what does it mean to know something. I like because Uranus revolutionizes. I think it's definitely going to revolutionize the field of education and how we gain knowledge and also probably decentralize that a bit. And probably things are going to be more online, but then the question also pops up again of, well, what is real? What is not real? Certainly, I think, and that's a bit future tripping right now, once Saturn moves into Gemini and forms a conjunction with Uranus, that we're going to get like the full aftermaths of what exactly all of this has been about and like finalize that process. But now we are just entering it. Yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna, that is 2032. So just
Yeah.
that's
A bit in the future.
a bit in the
I think,
future.
yeah, you bring up a really good point though about, our access, our energy, the amount of access people have to our energy and the current need, just the current kind of, this is very prevalent now. People feel the need to say, I'm taking a break from social media, or I won't be online. And I often think to myself, well, why do you even owe people that? Like your energy, you don't even need, like we almost feel obliged to tell people, sorry, you can't have access to my energy for the next 2 weeks because I'm going offline. It's almost like people feel entitled to a piece of you, particularly if you have an online presence, that you should be accessible and available all the time. And like one even small boundary, I put in place myself was, when I first started my online presence, anybody could DM me, and I got so overwhelmed and burnt out from the amount of DMs. And I was even amazed that, even when I got to 1,000 followers, I was like, oh, are so many people interested in DMing me? But they were DMing me with their astrology queries, which was lovely because I love talking astrology. But then I was like, oh wait, now I actually need to stop giving free astrology advice in the DMs. Then when I got a little bit bigger, my page, I realized, okay, I actually need to like switch off my access. So I changed it now that only astrologers that I follow back, maybe I would say peers can message me directly, and then everyone else goes into my message requests. And even that, it's like a little
Mm.
inbox I can't see, is a psychological break. But when I started my page, I was naive about how open energetically I was to all of these communications. And I think with Uranus and Gemini, all of us are going to be like, wow, like I'm so available. It's even like when you see people turn off seen on WhatsApp, people don't want to know when you were last online. It's almost like that sensory overload of, oh my God, they know I've seen the message. They know I haven't replied. Are they angry at me? And one thing Geminis, well, not all Geminis, but a lot of Geminis I know are really good at, I've lots of friends who are Geminis and my partner's a Gemini. Like they'll look at a message and then they like put the phone down and forget about the message. And I just think that's so refreshing because, I'm a
Yeah. Oh,
Cancer
I do that
sun.
constantly.
Yeah, and I'm a Cancer sun, and I'm like, how could you not see my message and not respond to it instantly? Like I'm so important, my Mercury and Venus and Leo. But like I've started to realize, oh yeah, like when a Gemini has read my message, it's gone into their Gemini filing cabinet bank of messages, but they don't ever feel the need to respond instantly or even to like acknowledge the message. And that's like a beautiful thing about Gemini energy that maybe more of us need to start embracing. This kind of, people don't have a right to access you like 24/7 online all of the time. But that's just something there that you said, Amiya, that kind of brought that to the fore for me.
Yeah, I agree. As a Gemini, I agree wholeheartedly. I also think that like this transit of Uranus and Gemini is already starting to make the whole being available all the time useless. I used to don't have WhatsApp. I have WhatsApp since like 2 years ago, and I didn't have WhatsApp beforehand. And one of the main reasons was that I didn't want to be available to people constantly. And when I open WhatsApp, one of the things that I made sure to tell my friends is if I don't answer to a message in like 2 weeks, message me again because I lost it. And like, if we truly are friends, if you trust me and I trust you, there's no issue in messaging me again. Like there's nothing wrong there. I'm not gonna take it in a bad way, and I hope you don't take it in a bad way that I'm not available all the time. All of that to say, I've seen as Uranus has gone into Gemini a lot of like overload with information, and this has to do with ChatGPT, and I'm gonna tell you that up in a moment. Uh, and that overload information has made it so that people are less likely to think you're available all the time because it's started to be a problem for everyone, not just as Geminis. On the other hand, the ChatGPT thing is true. Okay, I don't ever use a ChatGPT, but I was curious the other day and I started asking a GPT about me, and it took it like 3 tries, so 3 questions to say something that was totally not true, and I don't even know where he got it. So it's not like I don't know what I asked. Something like, "Is Duna? Oh, are Duna's astrology readings available?" And the ChatGPT outright say no. And that's funny because they are. They may be hard to find for ChatGPT, but they are. You can book a reading with me. And this is not, I didn't, this seems like I did this just to fake self promo, but like my point is, my point being, right now it's not giving accurate information at all. But most people are not aware of that. If you talk to your dad, it's like, ChatGPT told me something, and they say that as if that means something when it means absolutely nothing. I feel like that Saturn Uranus conjunction is gonna shine a light on that. And I know it's a long way, it's like 5 years on the road, but I feel like it makes sense because technology that is this advanced takes a long time to like really be understood by the general public. On the other hand, maybe not the general public, but the ways in which this problem can be shine a light on for me will probably happen around the times that that trine, that small trine gets activated by something that makes a kite in the opposite side. So in the beginning of Libra. The first example that comes to my mind is that Venus is gonna retrograde from Scorpio to Libra, so I might broadly touch that in some way. Then would be Mars at some point. I would look at every like main planet, so the big like Mars, Venus and the Sun, Mercury if there's a retrograde, and like tie up the times that they go over that area of like beginning middle of Libra, because I feel like that would activate that kite and kind of make a resonance on those Uranus and Gemini topics. Because in a lot of ways, it's very difficult to see the energy of the other planets when they are so far away from us and so into the collective and so not into the personal. It's difficult to see like exactly how it's gonna play out. But I would bet that those placements or people with those placements in Libra as well maybe see a lot of where this is like chat GPT spiritual psychosis thing is living onto or how is solving itself, because at some point it's unsustainable that people just keep repeating stuff that is just blatantly lies to each other for eternity. I feel like that is gonna blow up and someday.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about chat and a lot of other AI tools is that it's so blatant in how it just straight up spits out information in a confident way, which might be wrong, but that poses that question, right? Because even before these tools existed, people were doing the same things, you could say.
Yeah, it just has become like big now.
It has
I
become
feel
very big now, yeah.
the last time we had Uranus and Gemini, another important thing that I didn't mention was that it was the first time that television started doing propaganda, like
Mm.
really big time. So it's similar in which like the we're talking about the 40s and the first 50s. That was when, for example, the concept of teenager was created, because before that was kids and then you work and then you're an adult. And that's also when the concept of the nuclear family, so you have like a father, a mother, and two children, and ideally they're a girl and a boy. Those concepts and them being like the social norm started being like that in the 50s with Uranus and Gemini. Same thing, I feel like ChatGPT is trying to indoctrinate us into a new reality in which its lies become the truth, the social truth. But that doesn't make them more truth, it just makes them more widely available.
Did you want to add something to that, Katrina?
No, I really agree though. I think like it's going to be a big issue and like awareness will be really important for the collective while we're going through these transits.
Yeah, yeah, it will be. Again, the question is really what is knowledge? What is, I mean, truth certainly is a more Sagittarian term, but Sagittarius is the opposite sign of Gemini. So of course, there is always that question of what is true? What does it mean to actually know something? Is it because it's written in a book? Is it because it's been shown in an ad? Is it because a certain person said something? Like, how do we actually know? How do we verify knowledge? And what does it mean to be educated on a topic? What does it mean to have a certificate in or a degree in something? Like what does it actually mean? I think these are all very relevant Uranus in Gemini questions that I think it's going to open more questions and isn't necessarily going to answer them. But I think the point of Gemini so much is about asking the why this, why that. So I think this is where we are heading. Um, yeah, does anybody want to say anything else to Uranus in Gemini?
No, not really. Only just that, like, I think you summed it up really well. It's this cerebral energy of curiosity and asking questions and maybe holding space for multiple viewpoints because Gemini rules multiples. So, this idea that two things can be true at once, light and shade, and astrology is a great, teacher of that. Anybody that knows astrology very well will know that there are no universal truths in astrology, and this is why it's so important to discuss this astrological concepts. So Uranus and Gemini will really maybe separate, I feel, society. It can be divisive in some respects. It'll separate maybe people into two schools of thought. One school of thought will be, the people that will be very susceptible to um, propaganda and maybe being brainwashed or radicalized by things they read on the internet or facts they learn that they decide are true and this is the only truth. And then people that actually are and discerning enough to educate themselves, not necessarily to be educated, but to say, okay, like the internet says this, but let me go actually fact check that. Let me go check this out, because we won't really be able to trust all of our sources on the internet because of, the current state of affairs.
Definitely. By the way, Wikipedia is still completely free of AI and probably maybe gonna make a whole comeback.
That would be nice.
Yeah, let's hope so. have my hopes on Wikipedia for sure.
Mm.
Wikipedia save us. Uh,
Yeah. Did you want to add something, Duna? Or otherwise we can
no,
continue
we
with
can go to Chiron.
Chiron. Yes. Chiron moving into Taurus. This is happening on June 20th. And we had Chiron in Aries since 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right here? I feel
Yes,
like
you're right.
it briefly moved, I think, into Aries 2018, but not fully in 2019 or something like that. So it's been a
Yes.
while here as well, that we had Chiron in Aries, and I think Chiron in Aries has been very harsh, in a way where it's like really poking at our self-worth wounds and how capable or incapable we feel and are. Chiron in Taurus is going to bring a whole different set of topics, some that we already briefly mentioned before. And yeah, so who wants to take the lead on that one?
I have a lot of thoughts about this one. So a little bit of self-promotion as well, but I'm finishing an article of Chiron in Aries that I'm gonna have up in my Substack at some point, and like specifically the how it goes around the wound of identity and how it has very much made it dangerous to be who you are for certain people. And this is not the first time that happens. The last time we had Chiron in Aries coincided with the civil rights movement and the Stonewall and the gay liberation movement. So Chiron in Aries has pretty much had like a specific topics that have really, really resurfaced both times around and both times with a lot of backlash. And again, I'll more on that in that article because now we're gonna have a talk about Chiron in Taurus, which is a completely different thing. And Chiron in Taurus, I always again like to go to the historical precedent. The two times of Chiron in Taurus that was the last two times was right after those movements, after the Black liberation, civil rights, the gay liberation movements, when the petrol crisis happened. So Chiron in Taurus is mostly coincident with the petrol crisis and with the crisis of 1977. And it was a period of a great inflation and a great economical depression, which is not great news, but I don't know. I don't come to sugarcoat the astrology. And then the last before that one was in the years after the First World War. Not right after, but the period of between wars. Them For me, I always try to pin my head like to specific points that are very representative of its transit, and like the Chiron in Aries important moments of 1915, 16, where the the artistical movement of Dadaism, and the period that's just after the First War, where like the loss of the European identity as peace, as synonymous of peace, happened, like the sort of like questioning of rationality and of the European values. And Chiron in Taurus coincided more with surrealism. So Chiron in Taurus was a moment in which we saw artistically surrealism, but also the beginning of what was gonna become later the roots of fascism, specifically because both in Italy and in Germany, people were so impoverished that they had like a scarcity mindset. And like a lot of like the Chiron in Taurus in both eras, both in the petrol crisis and in the 20s, that led to the Great Depression of the 20s, are Chiron in Taurus transits. What can I say about the future and starting this year? Well, I hope that both of you have another other readings that are less gnarly. My reading is a little bit gnarly. I think the economic situation, the problem with people not finding a housing, and the problem with inflation, and the difference between the ones that have a lot of money and the ones that have less money is going to become worse and worse. And I think Chiron in Taurus is going to reveal that wound, and possibly because Chiron should in some way, like should I say should with like the arrow imaginary of Chiron, should the mind in some way of working towards like changing that. But I don't think the actual change will be within Chiron in Taurus. I think we'll have to wait for Chiron in Gemini to see like like a solution to that very ingrained economical problem, because mostly because of the other two times that we have in the past of Chiron in Taurus, which both were really, really gnarly economical depressions. So yeah, I open the floor.
Yeah,
Please tell
it's
me
yeah, it
something
feels
nicer.
grim, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
of what Taurus represents. Um, you know, anecdotally, I have some friends, some astrologer friends who have Chiron and Taurus. And one thing I've observed, is that sometimes they have trouble charging what they're worth, or they don't
Hmm.
charge, or they charge too much and turn away clients. They have like this kind of difficult relationship with money or finances or business in general, and Taurus essentially is abundance. If we think about it, like it's this Venusian archetype of, if you were born with Taurus energy, like abundance is your birthright. I always say this to people who are Taurian, you need to have nice things. But with Chiron and Taurus, there's this innate feeling of I don't deserve it or I'm not good enough for it. Um, and fears of an insecurity around having stuff or accumulating stuff or losing stuff. And the ingress chart for Chiron and Taurus, we have Venus and Leo opposed by Pluto. I could really see it as a move towards a cashless society with that Pluto
Hmm.
opposition, like government, because a lot of people, particularly people who are in lower socioeconomic status, use cash more. But like, don't get me wrong, rich people also like use cash, but particularly people that want to maybe earn some tax-free income might like, use cash. And this kind of idea that, wanting to control all like, let's say all tax-free income. So moving towards a cashless society, and there'd be massive resistance from the collective because we know that it's another form of control, really. Like there's an anonymity that comes with using cash that is freeing. Whereas it's like Big Brother, it's like the government is watching everything we do, watching all of our expenditure. And that is one thing I do think that will be an issue with Chiron and Taurus that will probably be debated, whether we should get rid of cash. We can already see less cash in circulation naturally, and places actually refusing cash. Particularly small businesses like coffee shops and things like that and little startups, it's just easier. My own business, I don't accept cash because I work remotely. So, it just is easier for me not to use cash. But I'm not in favor of a cashless society because I think that a cashless society is open for abuse. And, I would always just be there's like, I guess because I'm the Pluto and Scorpio generation, I just don't trust. I've got trust issues around the government. Um, and then another thing that I think is interesting that I know it might seem a bit off topic, but whenever there's an ingress, I always like to look at famous people who have Chiron and Taurus. And like when I was looking at Marilyn Monroe had Chiron in Taurus. And she had it like really close to her midheaven. I'm not sure how accurate her chart is, to be honest. But when I was thinking, wow, like, she was this probably, she'd Venus and Aries very close to Chiron at like 0 degrees Taurus. She'd Venus like at the final degrees of Aries. When you think like a Venus Chiron conjunction close to her midheaven, like she was kind of seen as maybe this feminine beauty ideal. And I do think Chiron and Taurus is going to bring to the fore a lot of the issues we've seen with the Pisces age of Botox and lip fillers and, you know, I can't think of the word for the thing that you for enhancing your rear. Being
BBL.
the BBL, yeah. Like all of these things, like Chiron and Taurus, I do feel it will invite us to strip things back. Saturn and Aries will definitely be stripping back. And Neptune as well in Aries. Neptune rules poisons. It will actually, say to people, okay, like, have you maybe mutilated your body in some way? Have you injected yourself with poison in some way? Have you like cut yourself open to reach some unreasonable beauty ideal? And are you fighting with Saturn, which is, the Lord of Time? Because every time we fight Saturn, we lose. We need to embrace growing old gracefully and like do whatever you want to your body, but be discerning about what you put into your body. Because I think Chiron in Taurus is very, from a nutritional point of view, it's very like, what are you consuming? Look at young people today. I'm not that old, but like young people today, I see them like at work. They're all eating protein bars. They're all eating protein yogurts. And I'm like, guys, like, what's wrong with just pure yogurt? Like, why do we have to eat stuff with protein added in? Like, you do know, like, this stuff isn't that good for you. It's like this need, there's myths being perpetuated that this stuff is good when actually, if you educate yourself upon research, and you ask any consultant in a hospital, it's actually not that good for you long term. And some of the beauty ideals, some of the standards are like completely, you know, very difficult to maintain. Some of the lifestyles people, bodybuilding, sculpting your stomach, having this washboard waist, having a six pack, all of these things I think are going to come to the fore and people are going to question them and they're going to be like, really? Do we need all this stuff? Like, do we need to, like, because Mars is going to be in Taurus as well when Chiron ingresses into Taurus, which is interesting. Venus will be in Leo. I do think it's going to ask us to really look at, and the South Node will be with the Moon in Virgo on the day of the ingress as well, which I think is interesting. And it's going to ask us, like, all this stuff we're consuming, all the stuff we're eating, all the stuff we're spending money on, and all of these, so-called beauty enhancements. Are they all necessary? Because I think Chiron and Taurus will really ask us to strip things back, be more natural, and lead a more maybe plant-based diet or lead a more natural whole foods diet or just, figure out where your food is coming from, rather than all this stuff with additives. That's something I just see as an overarching theme. But I'm not sure how you guys feel about that. But I do think these are things that will come up because it is a very long transit.
It is, yeah. Certainly also the square from Chiron to Pluto gonna be very interesting one. And I think it's gonna bring up even more these topics. And again, I'm gonna play a bit of ad devil's advocate here, because what we don't talk enough about this with Aquarius, but Aquarius has a lot to do with our ideals and like this perfect image. I mean, it's opposite of Leo, so it has similar qualities, even if they're more collective. But and I think this is exactly that part where we're gonna see that thing of like, oh yeah, it's you know, how can you survive with maybe inflation being high. Like, how can you, like, what are the actual tools you need to do this and this and this? And all the access is going to be like so irrelevant. Like, it's going to be so irrelevant if you want to go and get a beauty procedure done. Like it's going to be almost like who does that? Like, who does that nowadays? I think that's gonna definitely come up when this square moment arises. And obviously, Taurus having to do with also with our values, which is a lot of Venus, is it's gonna poke at our own wounds of worthiness and like, do we feel worthy to, I don't know, deserve things? I don't know if that's really the right word. Um, to just like live a good life, but what does it even mean? Because again, I think it's a lot of the negative sides of Taurus is like overconsumption and just hoarding and gaining more things and for like no good reason at all. And that's certainly what a lot of capitalism has done to us. And now it's like we're in a crisis of overconsumption, of clothes being made not to last 10 years, but to last one summer. And then next summer you buy the other thing. And it's kind of, I think, gonna poke collectively at that wound of overconsumption then. And certainly, and I'm future tripping here again a bit, but when Saturn moves in Taurus as well, then it's going to be like, okay, we're not fucking around anymore. Like, what are the consequences of the actions that maybe not everybody's as individuals, but collectively we have taken in producing way too much than we need? And certainly, I think it was interesting when the it's not the same constellation, but when we had that like Saturn, Jupiter in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus, at that time, interestingly enough, in the internet, a lot of people were going back to traditional values. The whole like trad wife trend really became big around these times, which is funny, right? People think like, oh, Aquarius is so progressive. Like Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. It can be quite traditional as well. Um, and I do think that might kind of come into the forefront a bit here as well. And yeah, which certainly I think is good, right? Like a lot of traditional
Mm.
things that have stood the test of time aren't meant to be mocked. Like there is some truth to it, or maybe something that like lasts a long time. But that I think is going to kind of be the question here. And I don't really have a conclusion to what I'm trying to
Are we
say.
seeing maybe like, are we seeing a precursor to this as well with the farmers protesting in France, about the quality of meat being imported? It seems very Plutonic as well and very Taurus energy, like Earth energy of, like let's like show people, do you realize what's in your food? And
Mm.
it seems quite extreme, their behavior. I don't know if you've seen the videos of their protests where they're like coming in with their tractors and dumping stuff. Yeah, it's just very interesting, but definitely when Saturn gets to Taurus, I mean, I would hope that all of us will be inspired by Chiron and Taurus to start growing our own food, even if it's just a window box in an apartment. Get familiar with, how to grow food, the food chain, because like I do think we are going to see, unfortunately, people hungry when Pluto squares Chiron and people struggling to have money for food. And that's like really, really sad, but that is definitely going to be an inevitable manifestation. I'm not sure where Ceres, that I know we're not really talking about asteroids, but Ceres is very connected with food and nutrition. But it would be interesting. I might run a chart at some point and see, what Ceres is doing
Mm.
when Chiron is in Taurus.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
I certainly think it just poses the question of like, is the overconsumption necessary? Because now we got so used to having everything available all the time, when for the longest time in humanity, that was not the case at all. We couldn't just go out and eat Asian food and then eat I don't know, Spanish food and then eat. Like it's not really normal for us to go to a supermarket and constantly have access to everything all the time, even if it's not really in season at all or being imparted. I think all of these things are gonna be definitely put into question because it's not good even for ourselves in the long run. I do think this is the part where and that's maybe my personal bias, but I'm for. It's almost like a going back, but like in a good way, where I think a lot of us are also really questioning what is progress? Are we really progressing? And I think we have this idea in mind where it's like all progress is good progress. But it's not the first time in history where people were like, wait a second, maybe where we're heading is not that good, and we might have to like go back to some like old ways of doing things. And I definitely think Uranus and Taurus has served as a bit of inspiration for that. And Chiron is gonna not serve as inspiration necessarily, but the necessity of what does that mean? And that's why again, channels like how you can survive on $50 a day, or learning how to knit your own shirts, or learning how to do these crafts and just this tangible, right? Taurus has all to do with like tangible things are actually super freaking useful. And it's really, we have to kind of step away from this idea that, and it's going to be hard because we've definitely fallen into the comfort of, wanting something and letting it be delivered the next day, which is not
Yeah.
fucking normal at all. And we're kind of going to have to like step away from that a bit, I think, over the coming years.
Ceres will be in Gemini, very close
Mm.
to Uranus. So we will
Yeah.
see
So,
probably an exacerbation of fast food and automated everything. A drive-through shop. You just drive through, get what you need and drive home. Or like food being delivered to your door by drone. All those things will just become more common and there will be a need for us to ground.
yeah. I also wanted to point out, just especially for people watching this and being like, oh my God, we're gonna be so starved in 2026, that this is the first ingress. Chiron goes back into Aries on September, I think, or so.
Yes, it's on September 18th. Or
By
was
the
it?
top of my
Yeah.
head. And it's not gonna leave Aries fully until 2028. So the story of Chiron in Taurus is not really a 2026 story, in the sense of like, similarly to when Pluto was entering Aquarius first time, we started to see all the AI and like the technology things and all of that happen, but in not as such a huge uh, way as there's been seen right now. So while some of those topics that we were talking about will start to become relevant in 2026, they're probably not going to affect everyone in a huge way until well into like 2029, 2030. So it's not like a topic that you should worry about in 2026, probably. Or like, yeah, worry about it, but like in the long, with a long-term vision, not with a
Yeah,
like,
like plant a garden maybe or plant a tree and then like
yes,
think about how you're going to grow food.
start thinking about learning how to plant a garden for sure. That's
Yeah.
like good advice. But if you don't know how to get your way around a garden in 2027, it's okay. We still have 2 more years of Chiron in Aries, which I do have my hopes in those 2 more years of Chiron in Aries to possibly move the needle more into towards of like politics and progressive politics and identity politics, because they have like the last whatever many fucking years of Chiron and Aries have been horrorful in that regards, but it feels like they have been horrorful not without a reason. So I do hope an end to that story as well. But anyway, just saying, it's the first ingress. It's not it's not the last. This is not like Uranus in Gemini or like Neptune in Aries or Pluto in Aquarius. We're not in those waters forever until like 10 years from now. That's not the situation yet.
Yeah, and I do want to something mentioned, not specifically for that transit, but just in general, which kind of always happens with with forecasts and you begin to like future trip and like, oh my gosh, and sometimes I'm sure we as astrologers know we go 10 years in advance and we're like, oh my gosh, when Pluto is in Pisces, it's gonna conjunct my Venus. What is that gonna be? And it's almost as if it's like it will make sense at that moment. So I feel like a lot of Chiron and Taurus, like we're gonna see that story right now.
Yeah, a lot of the things that we say
Yeah.
right now are not gonna make sense whatsoever for
Yeah.
2026. They will
Yeah.
make sense in retrospect, probably, or they will have like Katrina just mentioned, like the protests in France. That will probably become relevant to some transit in the future. It will be like a sort of like a precursor to something happening. That's how I see the Chironic Taurus story of this year. Not as like a full story of like get ready because everyone is gonna be starving, but more so we're
Yeah.
heading in a direction where like food, nutrition, and self-maintenance is gonna become more important.
Yeah, and again, a lot of solutions will probably arise in time as well. And I think even right now, and with a lot of people are also hearing about the Saturn Neptune conjunction, are like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? And it's like, it's maybe right now with the transits and with everything like kind of being still in Pisces, it seems very like, how could that even be possible? Like, how could next year be such a fiery year? But it's like once you're in it's gonna be so easy to actually act and to move, even though right now a lot of us feel more immobile, yes. So it's gonna make like at that when it enters Aries and you're in that, you're just gonna be like, the only logical thing I can do right now is act, even though right now maybe you're like, how would I be that person? So just in general for forecasts, I want to make people aware of that. And if nobody has anything else to add to Chiron, we can move on to our dear friend Jup Jup.
The chip with the juice.
Yes.
Um, we already talked about Jupiter a little bit on the notes. Um, I did want to mention that the Jupiter Cassimi, so as the conjunction with the Sun, is going to be at the same degree that Mars station retrograde. The last Mars retrograde we had, if you're an astrologer, you possibly there's no way you forgot about it. In last winter. So if that retrograde was particularly important for you in your life or things happen, this Jupiter cycle is probably gonna call back to the retrograde in some way because it's a Jupiter cycle and the last one was a Mars cycle. It's probably gonna be more positive but similar topics. And I'll let you both go with the rest of the Jupiter stuff that is not the notes, because I feel like there's not that much more, but
I
Yeah,
do
I
just
think
want to, sorry, just to mention for, we didn't say the date. Jupiter ingresses into Leo on June 30th. And now you can speak.
yeah, so on the
yes.
30th of June it's
And the
ingressing.
Cassini is August something. Let me look it up. But um,
It says here the Jupiter Cazimi is on July 29th, so
yeah,
almost
July
August.
29th. Yes, almost August. Yes.
So the ingress for Jupiter into Leo is on the back of a full moon in Cancer. Um, So I think that's quite significant because it definitely will like precipitate like maybe like a moment of clarity or illumination around what Jupiter has possibly been doing in the Cancer part of your birth chart before it, leaves and moves into Leo. So I think that is like a nice aspect. Like when it moves into Leo, of course, we have, straight away almost immediately, the opposition to Pluto, which
Pluto.
is, and then the square to Chiron. So like you've kind of got like a lovely T-square going on. It's so much fun always. It's never boring in astrology. So I do think it's not going to be like sunshine and rainbows, because Jupiter in Leo is the sun is so happy in the sign of Leo, but that opposition from Pluto and that square from Chiron is this kind of reticence, this holding back, this feeling of maybe like I always feel like when Pluto is opposite Jupiter, it's like you want to go, but you're not allowed go, or there's some restriction or some outside force controlling you. Like it's like coercive control. It's like it's like this regime that you want to break away from, because Jupiter is so expansive. And then the square from Chiron as well is almost like this fear or this insecurity holding people back. But I do think it's going to be an interesting transit because of what we've already discussed, the nodal aspect. So I do think people should really like pay close attention to the start of the Jupiter and Leo transit before the nodes change signs, because you're going to get a real taster of what this is about. Because when the nodes ingress into Leo and Aquarius, that's when, more discernment is required, more awareness, more conscious awareness of how you're operating in the Leo Aquarius aspect axis, and also probably how you're operating in the Taurus Scorpio axis, because that's going to be a very sensitive point, the Scorpio part in your chart, where a lot of like the pressure can be released from that T square.
Yeah, I think the Jupiter Pluto opposition is going to touch upon the things we kind of talked about a bit in the beginning, where it's almost like ironic that Jupiter moves into Leo, where kind of the first initial reaction would be like, "Oh, shine your light and be a star." But then it's almost like kind of not cool to do that in 2026, and it's cool to do the opposite and be more collective. So it certainly is an interesting dynamic of the opposition and of that square as well, right? We kind of get a T square where yeah, it's going to be almost uncool if that you're flaunting yourself and like putting yourself first there, even though surely the incentive is kind of going to be there because that's what Jupiter and Leo naturally activates in our chart. But we're going to have to be, well, not necessarily careful, because I don't want people to be careful. Like, it's like if you want to express yourself, like go and express yourself. Like, that's super freaking healing. But I think it's always this question of like, are you expressing yourself because it's like truly healing for your heart and you're feeling a calling to do that? Or are you doing it simply to be seen and, I guess rage bait people online or whatever? It's like for what reason do you really want to be seen? Like what is the reason behind that? And that's certainly, I think, gonna be the question. And of course, with the South Node lingering there as well, certainly gonna hinder Jupiter and Leo once it moves pretty close to that, because the South Node kind of has to do a decrease. So it is almost in a way gonna decrease. I'm thinking of the lamp, like this thing, it's gonna do this thing. So that's how I'm imagining this transit. And I don't know if anyone wants to say something about because we're going to get fire trines from Jupiter in Leo to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Anybody wants to say anything about that?
Yeah, the Neptune one's all right. I think when you've got a trine from Neptune to Jupiter, it is like, real visionary energy and an invitation to step into creativity, which is like the most extreme radical form of vulnerability there is being creative, making art, not necessarily for other people's consumption or not to make money, but just to make art as an expression of your soul. And that's what Neptune, trining Jupiter is about. And there is the square to overcome with Chiron, get over yourself and your own issues and just, shine your light. But it's our own, misgivings about ourselves that block us. A lot of the time we get in our own way, But then as well, I do think that Chiron in Taurus, let's say somebody wants to return to university or go back to college, Chiron in Taurus, that square could be, I don't have the funds, I don't have the money, I need a scholarship. It's that energy of like another block, another hurdle you have to overcome. But I do think that those trines, that fire trine is supportive.
Yeah, it's a trine after all. Do you want to add anything, Duna? I mean, not even necessarily to the trines, but just in general with Jupiter and Leo.
Not really. I mean, again, I said it already with the notes. When it conjuncts the south node, it's gonna be with Mars as well there. So
Mhm.
that adds the tension. Um, we already talked about that. Like, I feel like the portion that we did on the notes is very much like how to take some energy from this Jupiter, but also be cautious of like its downfalls or it's like excesses, which is always kind of like the thing to worry about it in terms of Jupiter.
Agreed, yeah. I feel like we woven a lot of Jupiter and Leo into a lot of the previous transits we talked about.
Yes.
So, um, yeah, if there's nothing more to say, we can move into the final two transits of the year, unless you want to say something else, Katrina.
No, I think like we've adequately
Okay.
discussed that one. Yeah, and like Jupiter, like one thing I will say about Jupiter, like I know one astrologer, she claims Jupiter is the most overrated planet ever, which I think is so funny because like I'm a Sagittarius rising, so like I will never like, I'm like, please don't give out about Jupiter. But Jupiter, it depends on the sign it's transiting, the nature of the gifts it bestows. I do think that Jupiter transits are beneficial, but sometimes you have to like dig a bit deeper or really pay attention or kind of have a relationship to the spiritual world or creativity to fully comprehend Jupiter transits because I think they can, believe it or not, I know Jupiter is known for excess, but I think they can be subtle sometimes compared to Saturn. So sometimes, like, I hear people say, oh, Jupiter transited this house and I got nothing. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure, you did get something, but sometimes you see the gift in retrospect when Jupiter is left. So that's why it's so
Mhm.
important when Jupiter is transitioning from Cancer to Leo, like, really, really pay attention to new people that come into your life. Sometimes Jupiter arrives as a person, it's not necessarily a situation. So that's what I would say to people, that are intrigued about Jupiter and Leo transit. Sometimes it can be like Jupiter and Leo may just be a really, really over the top person that comes into your life. And then with the opposition from Pluto, you realize they can be a bit of control freak and maybe they're too much for your energy. So, like be open-minded because Jupiter really is about the expansiveness of being open.
Yeah, I really like that point you made. I certainly think Jupiter has a lot of misconceptions around like being the
Mm,
planet of luck and bringing things into your life. I think a lot of Jupiter is like luck is meeting the opportunity and then actually like going for it once it's represented. And I think a lot of what Jupiter does is preparing us, which I think people get
mm,
really wrong. Like Jupiter is definitely here to like grant you your wishes, but it's here to also make you be able to receive them. So
mm,
it's going to expand you into that person that actually can receive the things you asked for. But that process, oof. That's growing pains. I think that's what a lot of people right now, and certainly the first half of 2026 with Jupiter still in Cancer are gonna feel into. Jupiter in Cancer certainly has brought up a lot of grief for many
mm,
people because it has expanded us in a way where it's like, oh, maybe after a life of being in survival mode, what does it feel to just receive and be okay with that, to be held? So Jupiter is definitely not just pleasant at all, and Jupiter in Leo putting us into the limelight almost is not the most pleasant experience at all if you don't like being at the center stage of things. So it definitely very good that you mentioned that. I want people to know that as well. Well, hey guys, we took another quick break because I was very thirsty and I had no more water left. And we're gonna head into our last part now, which is mostly constituting of talking about the retrograde periods, which, by the way, first of all, the outer like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they go retrograde every year. So we're not going to talk about that specifically because it's not really relevant in that regard. It happens all the time. Venus and Mars go retrograde not every year, but we are going to get a Venus retrograde this year by the end in Scorpio and Libra. And we're also not getting a full Mars retrograde, but we're getting a pre-shadow end of year, which we are briefly going to skim over. But we briefly wanted to talk about the Mercury retrogrades. Not all of them deeply, but they will all happen in water signs. And I don't know, I feel like you do not probably had something to say about that. So I'm gonna let you talk.
Yeah. Okay, so for the people listening and then maybe don't know a lot about astrology, if there's some people, um, the retrogrades, all of them, the other planets, well, excluding the other planets, because that is kind of like more often and difficult to like time out how they affect you. But all of them, so the Jupiter, the Saturn, the Mars, the Venus, and the Mercury, uh, will affect you if they touch your chart in some way and if they are activated by some technique. The most usual that people use is profections. So if you are in a perfected year where the house that is activated is ruled by Mercury, then you watch out the Mercury retrogrades. If you are in a perfected year in which the house that is affected is a Saturnian house, then watch the Saturn retrogrades. Otherwise, they're not super effective. The exception being that the Mercury retrogrades always make things wonky for everyone because it's a really like very, very close to the Earth planet and has very tangible, specific significations that we usually always go over, like the communication breakdowns, the like technology malfunctions, and all of those things always repeat during the retrogrades. And then the Venus and Mars, mostly because of their rarity, because they are rare, relatively rare, every 2 years or so. That being said, if your rule, so if your ascendant is in any sign that is ruled by Mars, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter, those retrogrades will generally affect you more because you're ruled by that sign. Um, Other than that, you don't have to be looking into every retrograde. So we're gonna go very fast into the retrogrades. The three Mercury retrogrades of next year are very easy because the three of them are in the three water signs. So the first one is in Pisces, and I don't have the dates right now, but you can say the dates later, Amiya. And the second one is in Cancer, will be around the summer, and the third one is in Scorpio. Because they are in one sign, they don't change signs, neither of them. The topics are going to be those of the house that is in your chart, Pisces, Cancer, or Scorpio. And we were joking before off camera, Katrina and I, that these retrogrades, because they're in water signs and those are like the most emotional signs, might bring more excess than the usual retrogrades. But they're always about bringing things back to your life in some way. That's what Mercury does. Or making you slow down by making it more difficult to do like daily tasks. That is kind of like the general Mercury retrograde vibe, and I don't think there's anything this year which is particularly resonant in any of those. Yeah, I would say that's a good sum up of the Mercury retrograde. And I'm gonna let you
Yes,
both
so
as yes.
I just let me just like briefly say when they're happening. So first Mercury retrograde we get around February 26th till March 20th. So pretty much when we start the spring equinox, we're out of the Mercury retrograde. That's actually good. This one's going to be in Pisces, and then the other Mercury retrogrades in Cancer is going to be around June 29th. So actually just one day before Jupiter moves into Leo. And that one's gonna last until July 24th. And then the last one in Scorpio, we are getting October 24th and it's gonna last until November 13th. Exactly. And again, all the water signs are going to be activated. We are thinking back to the water trines that have been following us this November. But yeah, do you have anything to add specifically to the Mercury retrogrades, Katrina?
Only my only advice would be to be like I find retrograde season in general, but particularly Mercury retrograde is a good time to redirect your energy inward rather than get caught up in the like everything's going to be late, everything my flights are going to be delayed. It's actually more of a time to go inward rather than direct your energy outward because the retrograde planet's energy is directed better when we direct it inward. So it's like a very good time being in water signs for journaling, for nesting, for retreating, for all those kind of receptive activities. And yeah, there might be a little bit of nostalgia, sentimentality, those sort of emotions come up. And with Scorpio as well, retrogrades in Scorpio, I find can bring up, things we've buried, hidden traumas, things like that. So they can be delicate periods, sorry, they can be delicate periods emotionally, but fruitful, and productive when we've worked through it. And I would say that the February retrograde is like a really good kind of a closing up of the Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces. It might be like there's a conversation you need to have with someone about something that happened during Neptune Pisces or Saturn Pisces, time. And like having that conversation, maybe when Mercury goes retrograde or direct or whatever, you might need several conversations, but when it's done, there will be like this sense of clarity. And the same, it's quite fitting that, when Mercury goes retrograde in Cancer, it's coming to, the end of Jupiter's, period in Cancer. So again, like conversations around that. And the Scorpio one, I'm not really sure, but I think Scorpio energy is always like very intense in a poignant type of way.
The last retrograde we had was partially in Scorpio, so that
Yes.
can serve as like if you look up the last retrograde we had like not so long
Mm.
ago was partially in Scorpio. So part of that story already developed this past October, November.
Coming back and revisiting, yeah, for sure.
And now that we're talking about Scorpio, the Venus retrograde, which Amiya will say the dates in a moment,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
is in Scorpio and going back into Libra.
Mm.
Um, and that one, Venus retrogrades are the ones that usually bring like things, bring back things that we value or
Mhm.
made us rethink our values. And in Scorpio and Libra, especially with Saturn already like very present in Aries, it could mean like a rethinking of like those Libra Aries, so like you, like the other and you values in relationships and how those values can be tested by all the other transits happen around it. But I'll let you both expand on that Venus retrograde.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
let me
you go first.
I just like want to say the dates and everything so people know.
Yes.
And also talking about that last Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. I mean, it's going to partially coincide with the Venus retrograde as well. So in that case, that last Mercury retrograde is going to be very present with Venus retrograde as well. And Mercury's going retrograde on October 24th, which is one day after the sun moves into Scorpio, and one day later, Venus is moving back into Libra, right? So, interesting moment here. The Venus retrograde period is from around October 3rd, 4th till around October 14th, 15th, depending on where you are in the world. It's going to end in either of those dates. And yes, what I do also want to mention with Venus retrogrades, or just Venus in general, is this very interesting planet where you can look back exactly 8 years ago what Venus was doing because she was doing exactly the same thing. And we had that last Venus retrograde in Venus and in Scorpio in 2018. So look back at what was happening in your life in October, November 2018, because that was the last time we had that Venus retrograde in both of these signs. Pretty much. I mean, history rhymes, it doesn't repeat exactly, but it definitely is worth always looking back at that time to maybe get a few glimpses of something coming back, because that's what retrogrades usually do. They offer like a deeper layer to something that we've already experienced. So that's what I wanted to mention.
What I like about the Venus and Scorpio transit is that, Venus traditionally doesn't do very well in Scorpio. So again, a huge learning point for all of us. When Venus is moving through a sign she, according to traditional astrologers, doesn't do well in. And then, she's gonna go back to Libra where, she does relatively well in. And that lovely balance of that light and shade of Venus, operating easier and then struggling a little bit because when Venus goes in this kind of underground retrograde journey, and I always say it's like a Hades Venus, Venus in Scorpio, it is an opportunity for us to look at all of the unconscious, undeveloped parts of ourselves, because it's so easy and like prior to learning astrology, we project a lot of stuff at other people. They did this to me, they did this, they did, or whatever. But like Venus retrograde in Scorpio is a really good chance to look at yourself and look at what you bring to the table and all the ways you're showing up and how you might project some of your stuff on other people and how you operate from below, maybe rather than from above. And when she's stationing to go retrograde, like so many planets this year, she's going to square Pluto. And, she's also going to square Mars, and she's ruled by Mars and Leo. And Mars and Leo will be activating some of the ground that Jupiter and Leo has already traveled over. So again, it's like, what is Jupiter trying to expand in the Leo part of your birth chart? Because Mars now is coming to push you and motivate you to start it. But Mars is going to square Venus, square Pluto, and it'll be an out of sign square to Chiron because Chiron will have retrograded back into Aries, of course. But it's still, I still pay attention to out of sign squares because it's like you still feel them. If you're sensitive, you feel them. It's that kind of energy of, I don't really want to do this. When it's a T square, it's always like, I don't really want to do this, but I have to do this because, it's not, it hurts a bit to do this. So I think that this Venus, well, I always think that Venus transits are really good transits to work on self-love, no matter what sign they move through, but particularly Scorpio and yeah, anything that you're ashamed of, anything that you've kept hidden. It's a good time to be a bit maybe more authentic and vulnerable about it because Mercury will be co-present in Scorpio too.
It certainly screams like a time to have these deep, life-changing conversation when it comes to what you truly need in relationships and other people, because that's generally always what Venus retrogrades invite us to do. I feel like every time I step out of a Venus retrograde, I know much clearer what I actually want. And and it has a bit of a similar signature to that Venus retrograde we had this year, where Venus was also going back and forth between Aries, a Mars ruled sign, back into Pisces, where Venus is not domiciled but is exalted. So it has a similar feeling to like, okay, we got one part of the retrograde where Venus is traditionally not doing so well, and the other part where Venus is actually doing quite well. So we get like both of these parts of understanding also these houses in our charts, I would say, and like how they function and like how Venus functions in both of them. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Venus in Libra is I mean she does well there. Sure, it's domicile. She's home there. But Venus in Libra is also extremely socially aware and usually not so good at putting one's needs first, more so looks at the needs of other people, or is just like very aware in how to like get what you want by climbing the social ladder or saying the right thing. And I think it's kind of when Venus goes retrograde in that Libra part of our charts, it's gonna bring up almost like the shadow aspect of what are we doing? Like, what are the silly little things we are doing to get our needs met and again, and this is coming back to also when Mercury is retrograde in Scorpio, of like, what are the silly little like things we do, or where are we not communicating directly? Like, where are we making it unnecessarily hard for us to actually just get what we want, and maybe being a bit less scared about like our true needs and desires, because Venus in Scorpio wants to live life to its fullest, and that means life in all its facets. It almost gets a bit of a high of like really being in a relationship. Sure, there's a lot of like obsessive possessive tendencies that can come up with Venus and Scorpio, which is going to also be relevant for some during that retrograde. So I do think it's certainly interesting to get both of these signs present. And then obviously once we get that Kazemi moment in the middle, that's and I don't know exactly at which date that happens when and Venus meets with the sun. But that's always like there's always like this first part of the Venus retrograde. She meets the sun, and then she like slowly is kind of coming out of the underworld, so to say. And it's like that other part of the Venus retrograde, pretty different than that first part.
And you mentioned what you mentioned is so true because Venus, when she goes through Libra and when she retrogrades into Libra and when she comes back again over to Libra, she's going to oppose Chiron in Aries at 29
Mhm.
degrees. That's three hits from Chiron. And like, that's the wound of, where am I self-abandoning in my relationships because I'm being too nice, too placating, too malleable. Where am I people pleasing? Where am I like, burying my needs? And Venus in Scorpio will, when Venus in Grace Fat in Scorpio, you won't be able to like be so nice, which is empowering. It's going to be like, no more Mrs. Nice Guy or Mr. Nice Guy. I'm just going to say it like it is. And that's like some of the beautiful side of Scorpio energy, that like that power of authenticity, that, that lack of fear.
Duna, do you want to add something?
No, you both said it perfectly.
Great. Well, um, yeah, I don't have anything else to add. There's one thing I just briefly want to talk a bit about, even though this is happening technically 2027, but it's happening like
27
right January. And and it's the pre-shadow period of
retrograde.
Mars retrograde, yeah, because Mars is going to go retrograde in January of 2027, but we are going to feel the effects already before that. Sometimes I feel like the pre-shadow period can be quite loud, like even Venus pre-shadow, sometimes even Mercury pre-shadow, I feel like is sometimes even a lot more chaotic than the actual Mercury retrograde from my experience. Um, and specifically, I wanted to highlight that because Mars is going to go retrograde in Virgo and Leo in beginning of next, 2027. And that is, and Mars is going to do a lot in Leo, right? It's going to have like that kind of conjunction with Jupiter and with the South Node. And so I do think the story there for that retrograde is already beginning to build in 2026, but is going to get further developed, obviously, once Mars actually goes retrograde, which is going to be beginning of 2027. Yeah, I don't know if anyone actually even really wants to add
Yeah, I
anything
think
to
it
this.
goes retrograde February 2027, I think, in Virgo, yeah. Am I
It
thinking of or no,
is.
sorry, 2020. Oh, I'm looking at 2027. Hang on.
It
I'm
is
getting ahead of
January
myself.
10th.
20 January 10th. Oh, right. Okay, hang on. Am I looking at the right
And
chart?
it, yeah,
Mars
and
enters
it's
Virgo.
January 10th, and it stations
Oh, yes.
direct,
Sorry, excuse me, guys. I'm
and it
looking at
is
2027.
and it stations direct at the end of March,
Mm.
and it stations direct nearby the south node. So that's interesting. They don't touch. Well, depends if you do the min node or the true node. They
Mm-hmm.
barely. So yeah, it's interesting. It's probably gonna bring some of those parts of the Jupiter South Node story in a much rougher way around like February, March of 2027. But I think that's for the forecast of 2027, to be honest.
For sure, yeah. But the themes are right. The themes I feel like
Yeah,
are
the scenes are gonna repeat
forming.
in some
Exactly.
way for sure. So like whatever happens for you at that time in August and September of 2026 is probably gonna come back in March 2027 in the house of your chart that is Leo. And the houses that are ruled by the sun, or where the sun is, where the sun is actually. So yeah, but I wouldn't say much for now. But I haven't really thought deeper about like Mars in Virgo, retrograde, Mars in Leo. I
But
feel like
Mars
that's
is really
homework.
active, isn't it, in 2026?
Yeah,
You know,
2026
and
and
2027 as
2027.
well, but it's very active, like in terms of rulership.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, with like ruling over Saturn and Neptune and everything.
and Neptune.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
and a lot of the retrogrades as well. Well, the Scorpio ones will be ruled by Mars too.
true.
It's going to be
Yeah, so
interesting.
it's again, I just wanted to like bring it up because it is like it's not in that case relevant that it's happening in 2026, but it is relevant because it's 2026 is informing what that Mars retrograde in 2027 will be like. And definitely is worth talking more about that once we get to that place. But I do think it's good mentioning because it's like that story certainly is in 2026. And as you said, Katrina, is like there are a lot of transits are ruled by what Mars is doing, and Mars certainly has a very interesting story with Jupiter and the South Node in summer that is going to be relevant for that as well. So just like keep an
Mhm.
eye out for that story because it's going to deepen more in 2027.
So
Watch out
likely
for
things we,
Mars.
s- oh yeah, so likely things we start maybe like the end of 2026. You know, things we initiate, plans we make may need some revision or tweaking come January 2027, February. We might need to like revisit some things or look at them again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we're ending 2026 on a bit of a ambiguous note. But that's fine, right? Because
Open
for me it's
chapter.
like I mean, yeah, it's like ending the calendar year. So I guess what I want to ask you guys, how if you could use maybe one or max three words, how would you describe 2026?
Ooh. I'm going to check my notes. Um, childlike is one word I would use. Um, and forging, like the energy of forging into the
Hmm.
unknown, because that's a real Martian concept to me. And initiation, rather than, like seeing things through to completion, it's more like initiation, just like, and that's kind of bringing me back to the child as well. And when you think about a child as well, children are a bit volatile, they haven't learned to manage their emotions, to control their impulses. So, like, all of that will kind of come to the fore, I believe, in 2026. This kind of learning to manage the childlike energy, I guess, that is very Aries-like, because we're going to have so much Aries energy activated. Um, like that energy of when we're babies, how do we communicate our needs? We can't speak, so we cry, or we throw our toys out of the pram, or we stomp around, or we give people a silent treatment, or make faces. And this kind of maybe need to look at our own selves and try and approach 2026 from a place of maturity, yet also that lovely innocence, that childlike innocence, and the lack of inhibition that children have when they approach things. A child sees a shiny object or like will move towards it, this kind of openness and curiosity. Those would be my words for maybe describing 2026. And I think they are quite Jupiterian maybe, but I always like to be on the side of positivity, probably tried to steer away from toxic positivity, but it's hard when you're a Sagittarius rising. It's hard.
So I'm gonna use an expression. It's an expression that has three words. It's in French. It's l'enfant terrible, which is an expression used to describe uh, difficult children, almost like adolescents, who give trouble, and which was used also to describe the movements of artistic vanguard in the 1910s and 1920s, and how they made people feel very uncomfortable. That's my 2026. Three words.
Ooh, what to? Um, I was asking you guys this question. I haven't even thought of anything myself, but I guess what's just coming to my mind right now is burn it down. Like burn down what needs to be burned down. I think that certainly gives the fire energy, even though we all know that fire can also be dangerous and volatile. We can start burning things down, and then it's like, oh wait, now it's too much, and gosh, now I burned down the whole house, even though I just wanted to make a small fire. But I do think whatever needs to be burned down, let it burn down, to make space for something new, because it is a new year, but it is literally a new year in the most simple of terms. And something that I have been telling people for the last, I don't know, 5 years now is that I think these times that we are in are equally as exciting as they are terrifying. And I think it's completely good to be excited and curious because, like, yes, it is interesting, and also have respect of the things that are going on because it won't just be easy. And I think next year or 2026 certainly is a year of discomfort, and a lot of us probably kind of having to step out of our comfort zones. So these are my final words for today. And yeah, does anybody have any last words here? Otherwise, I'm kindly going to ask you to, yeah, shout yourself out or anything else that you want to say. And then we're going to slowly round this off and close this off.
Thanks so much for having me on, Amiya, and I'm really inspired by everything both of you talked about tonight, and even your closing words. It made me think of that quote. I had to Google it because, I'm not a Gemini, I'm a Sag. But there's an American theologian, Frederick Buechner, and he says famously, "Beautiful and terrible things will happen. Do not be afraid." And I love that idea. Like, when you're moving into a year that looks maybe a little bit challenging, it's like, yes, some beautiful things will happen. Yes, some terrible things. But like the important thing is that you move with awareness and intention and not fear. So I think that's a lovely thing to pass on to people that watch this. If anybody wants to find me, they can find me usually over on Instagram or on TikTok. And I'm not accepting bookings for 2026 anymore, but I'll be opening, or sorry, for 2025, excuse me. I'm thinking about 2027 now, but I will be opening bookings for 2026 soon. And yeah, if anybody's looking for a reading or wants to learn astrology, go check out my website. I have a lovely guide that's on offer at the moment. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you both in this lovely space where we can discuss astrology.
Oh, yeah, it was also very lovely to me as well. I, yeah, Katrina's words were so good. I don't really have a lot to add about the. I'm sorry. As a Gemini, I know my limitations. But like, you can book with me readings on my Calendly booking link. I'm sure Amiya will put it in the description. We're also doing the Decan Dance, Amiya and I, yet, which is like an exploration of each one of the decans of each one of the signs. And we do the first decans of each sign each month. That's going to end with Pisces. So we have 3 signs to go. And I'm thinking probably after we finish the decan dance, I might do some sort of like mini reading focus only on decans, offer only also on my Calendly. I will announce that as well. Other than that, I encourage people to join the decan dance, even if it's just for the last 3 signs, because every time maybe mostly for selfish reasons. Every time we have someone new and talk about the decans with someone new is very, very enlightening. And it makes me think more deeply about the decans, and I'm never gonna stop being amazed by the stories of the decans. And yeah, you can find me at Duna Haller on Instagram. And thank you, Amiya, so much always for having me in these great and super fun things. And thank you, Caitriona, because it was a pleasure to hear from you and to bounce ideas back and forth.
Yeah, so I'm gonna close this off. Thank you so, so much, both of you, for being here. Like that was so great. I feel like my uh Gemini moon, Sagittarius, and Mercury mind is stimulated in all the right ways. I love that. Um, and yeah, if you're listening to this, you're probably, I'm not sure if I'm gonna put it up on Spotify. I might also put it up on Spotify, not just on YouTube. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, if you want to support this channel and everything, please, feel free to click the subscribe button or leave a comment. Or what I think all of us love is when you shoot us a DM or a mail or something, or you have just a question, or again, or you can put it down in the comments below. Like, we love reading through that. So feel free to do that as well, or just leave a like or share this with anyone that you think might find this useful as well. This is how you can support each of us doing the work that we are doing. My readings are, to be completely honest, quite limited, and they're not even like really fully open as I'm focusing a lot more on output. But I'm mostly available through like workshops and things like that, which I'm probably going to expand way more in 2026. And do more things in real life than online. So, but yeah, it's still worth also following me on Instagram because sometimes I don't share the same things on Instagram as I do on YouTube or vice versa. So, so I'm a bit all over the place like that. So it's worth keeping up with both of this. And yeah, I wish everyone that is listening to this an equally exciting as terrifying year of 2026. I hope it's filled with a lot of growth and movement, and you really doing things because this year is great for that. Yeah, and I'm sending everyone so much love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And hopefully, we're going to see and talk to each other soon. So, bye, everyone.